Hello and welcome to the English rebroadcast of the Russian Gwent Open. I am joined by Jaggerous here, and we're going to be casting this month's Open Gwent tournament. Say hi, Jaggerous. I'm doing great. I'm having a fantastic morning. It's gonna be a little earlier for me now than all of you guys because, of course, I'm not too much of a morning person, and I'm starting a little earlier than normal. But hey, I'm excited to cast some Gwent.
Yeah, it should be exciting. I mean, we've only had a patch fairly recently, so there hasn't been much of an established tournament meta. The only tournament I think there's been before this was the TGLO, where we saw all sorts of crazy things, including Shoop. So
Yeah,
don't really know what to expect.
I think a lot of people will be kind of expecting Squirtle to be decent because it's got a pretty high play rate and ladder, and this is something we talked about just like a couple days ago at the talk show. But I think people will really underrate kind of how counterable that style of deck is. I mean, there's certain decks like Henselt and even Deathwish monsters that are cropping up that do very well against that sort of thing. And B, I mean, the play rates are just kind of inflated by the faction challenge, and I think we'll actually see like some pretty good diversity here in terms of power level and win rates.
Yeah, I'm intrigued just to see what people go for with Skellige. I'd love to see some Axeman because Axeman is really fun. But we saw Greatswords during TGLO, so Greatswords is another deck that people could bring. But then if people opt to say bring Alchemy, Alchemy counters Greatswords really hard. Or if you go for monsters and you happen to have teched in Caretaker, that again is a big issue for Greatswords. As I know, I did steal someone's 22-point Greatsword the other day. So
Jaggerous, we might not see Skellige.
I love Skellige. You think no Skellige?
No, I'm not saying no Skellige, but we'll have to see. I mean, like you said, it gets countered by something like Alchemy, and what we saw in the TGLO was specifically somebody bringing a Greatswords deck after banning Alchemy, and that's just something that you can do in tournaments. Obviously, the environment is just going to differ from ladder, because having that one ban can mean the world in terms of like what decks you are able to bring and find success with.
For sure. I think Nilfgaard's another interesting one in terms of what you bring, because it seems to be that the archetypes are all fairly competitive in their own right. Like, I see Reveal on the ladder, I see Alchemy, I even see Spies, despite the changes to the Impera Enforcer, I believe it is.
Yes,
so
Impera
it'll be
Enforcer.
intriguing to see with Nilfgaard, because you don't necessarily know. Just if someone is bringing Jan, that could be Alchemy, but equally it could be Spies. So you don't necessarily know how to mulligan and how to plan going forward.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We'll really just have to see what people do. And of course, guys, since this is a live broadcast, these games are being played live, and we are rebroadcasting this live. This is the English cast for a originally Russian tournament, so we should be getting into it very soon. Here are the brackets. Nah, okay, that's not the brackets. Okay. A couple Russian dudes. Okay. So as soon as they go to the brackets, I'll just be able to go to them as well. Until then, Jaggerous and I will just keep talking about decks.
Yeah, this is the fun of a live broadcast. During the TGLO, for example, all of our open tournaments, you always get comments, the broadcast is pre-recorded and the casters are live, and then it's like the broadcast is live and the casters are pre-recorded. Are you pre-recorded, Swim? Is there something you're not telling me here?
No, I'm not pre-recorded.
You gotta prove it to the chat, like hold up a sign with like the date on it or something.
Shoe on head.
So that they know the truth.
I unfortunately don't have any shoes to put on my head.
See?
Over here.
No good. I've got a shoe. Here you go.
Oh my god.
We gotta prove it's live, you guys.
Oh, you can't actually do it. Oh no, that's like the first rule of 4chan, Jaggers.
First rule of 4chan, don't put a shoe on your head.
Oh no, that's not the first rule of. Anyway, so these games, the four, I was gonna wait until we actually were able to go to the. Oh, there's the bracket. Let me pull it up quick. There it is.
Hey, we do have the bracket.
So the four semifinalists here are Angstrom, Negative Zetrix, Rolton Shive, and Son of Flame. Now, Angstrom was one of the participants in last month's tournament for the RuGwent Open January, and the others are unknown to me. Jaggerous, would you happen to know any of these Russian fellows?
I can't say that I do, but I think it's always fun to see upcoming names from different scenes. Like the Russian scene, they do have some known names, Mago being one of them, although we don't see him here. But ultimately, it's always good to keep an eye out for people who are kind of up and coming within different areas, because ultimately, we've got the Challenger qualifier coming up, and I don't know who all of the top 200 are on Pro Ladder, for example. So there's totally a chance that one of these people could be top 200 Pro Ladder and could go through that and qualify for Challenger. So it's always good to see names before we go into tournaments. But here comes first game.
Here we go. So we see Angstrom versus Zetrix. Zetrix Brewer getting banned out, pretty typical ban, and Angstrom Herald getting banned out by Zetrix. So Zetrix has a lineup that is a little bit afraid of Axeman.
Oh man, I was so excited for Axeman as well. This is quite upsetting. We can see the Monsters Dagon lineup it looks like a Siren deck, so Moonlight.
Yeah, it looks like a bit of a hybrid deck. We've seen a couple of these floating around, like the kind of like Fog/Moonlight style of things. And of course, you would run something like Siri Nova in this, presumably, although he is sitting at 25 cards, so unless he's cut 1 silver, that's not the case.
No, I think it's going to be interesting to see what Angstrom has brought. I mean, considering Zetrix has a alchemy lineup, which means he's going to be removing a lot of those point engines. But because the Alpha Werewolf is immune, he can't actually remove that, which means that he can't easily counter the amount of points gained through at least one source of Moonlight. He can easily, kill the Sirens, but that Alpha Werewolf is not going to be targetable.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's a pretty good strategy against what Alchemy Nilfgaard has to offer. The one thing is going to be the Ancient Foglets, and here we see Angstrom just playing out the Siren Moonlight. Now this is going to do a good job of just giving him value over time in addition to the Fog. So right off the bat, he is ranking up 4 points per turn.
Yep, and each of those little wolves is also going to be a beast, which means they'll get buffed by the Moonlight as well. And effectively, he's set up a lot of targets for Zetrix, but because there's 4, that requires 4 removals, so it's going to be pretty difficult to do. We do see the standard play there going on to Jan, though, giving him the 6 points from the Mandrake, which makes Kahir extra strong.
Yep, and it's going to be up to Zetrix how he wants to use this Venhemar. We're not seeing him use it yet. He could Frost to override the Moonlight. He could clear the Fog as well, but he's just sitting on it for now. So he's got a bit more of a plan with this.
Yeah, I do wonder what he'll choose to do, considering there is Moonlight on the board. The thing is, he's only got 1 Frost, so he can only clear 1 Moonlight. Although he doesn't have to play units into that middle row, he could just kind of sacrifice the Foglet and choose to counter the Moonlight instead. But when you have as much removal as Alchemy does, you're maybe not so bothered about the Moonlight existing if you can just kill everything that's sitting in the Moonlight.
Yes, exactly. And here's the Ancient Foglet coming out. This will often be met pretty swiftly with something akin to a Viper Witcher. It's going to depend exactly how much damage these Witchers do, though. He's going to be playing out the Novice out, and this is just going to play for a 14-point play off the Ale, just staying ahead by a really wide margin there.
Yeah, 11 points on a Foglet is hard to kill, to be honest. Alchemy, typically you see around 10. Occasionally you do see 11-point Viper Witches, but usually people have them at the 9 or 10 mark because that's generally sufficient to kill most of the targets that you want to kill. So this Foglet is now, I would say, definitely out of range for a one-shot kill. So it'll be interesting to see what Zetrix chooses to do, considering at the moment Angstrom is getting, 5 points per turn between the Moonlight, the Fog, and the Foglet.
Yeah, and we're seeing a Black Blood in Zetrix's hand as well. Now, Black Blood is a card that can actually achieve pretty surprising value. It has some pretty good grabs, something like a Water Hag, of course. Arrakis Venom is great here, or you could Rain to override the Moonlight. It's got some amazing options, but he's gonna use the Viper Witcher instead, it looks like. And he does have the target of the Ancient Foglet there. Now, there's the 9 damage. If he can deal 4 more, then he can stop it from growing further. And he might try to go for an Abaya next turn for that.
Yeah, so we know now that there's 9 alchemy cards in deck, so Foglets are going to be a little bit of a problem, though whether this is Angstrom's only Fog remains to be seen. We've got 1 Foglet, we've got 1 Fog. Will he run more Fog in this deck? This is kind of an unusual style of deck, so not really sure what it is that he's going to be doing. Although there's Mandrake onto that Yan, which denies the final round of Kahir, which is actually, I think, a really big play, because that Kahir into the Yan target is often a hell of a lot of points, and it's very hard to overcome.
Yeah, and when you're able to stay ahead of the opponent, when you're not really playing for round one, I mean, Angstrom is in such a dominant position. He's got the full moon, the moonlight going off, he's got the fog going off, and he's just kind of waiting to force Zentrix out of the round. And when you're in that position, you really love being able to just focus on denying the round 3 instead of putting more pressure into a round you don't need to. So that Mandrake's worked wonderfully for him.
This runestone, however, is kind of awkward for Zetrix. You've got Swears, Fringilla, or Orcs. You could say it's a bit Orcswood, considering he's only, he's down 3 points at the moment, but with 5 points of weather, he's not going to be able to gain a huge number of points. There's not a lot of great lock targets, so maybe you go for the Swears and hope you get lucky in what you target.
Yeah, I mean, you could hit a Foglet and assume there's more fog. There's the Siren, and that's going to go ahead and discard. Was that 2 Sirens or 1 Siren out of Angstrom?
Well, he's got 1 in hand, so it can only have been 1.
Yeah, that's sound reasoning.
Yeah. Anyway, it's Angstrom's turn now, and it'll be interesting to see what he does. He's been holding on to this Alpha Werewolf and the Siren, which suggests that, to me, he wants to play them in another turn.
Yes.
So the fact that he's not played the extra Moonlight now means that I feel like he's holding on to them. The Werewolf he could play kind of whenever. He's already got Weather on the board, or Moonlight on the board, but actually opting for the Geels into the Frightener. And pulling more targets into that fog.
Yeah, that's pretty good, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on Zetrix. We may see a pass coming out pretty soon, because if you're Zetrix and you keep playing into this round, and you do a play that's maybe a little too slow and Angstrom gets ahead of you, then you have probably lost the game at that point, because you are going down multiple cards. So it looks like Angstrom is going to cleanly be able to play any single card here and win on even without any carryover on Zetrix's end. Looks like a very poor situation for Zetrix to find himself in.
Yeah, especially with the number of points being racked up every turn, it's very easy for Angstrom to get ahead. And on top of that, Angstrom has Caretaker in hand, so he can kind of deny a little bit of Zetrix's graveyard. And there's that Swears, for example, so he could choose to just try and get rid of a lot of cards from Zetrix's deck if he wanted. He's also got the Algul to maybe eat favorable targets. So ultimately, I think it's going to be interesting to see how Angstrom chooses to play out the next round, considering what he has in his hand.
Yep, there's the Werewolf dropping and beating him cleanly by 8 points in this case. Now, Zetrix does still have some tools. The Black Blood can find something pretty relevant here, and the Van Humor will do a good job of completely cleaning up the Siren when Angstrom does decide to play her. There's the Cantarella as well, but it's not going to find as much use after having lost round 1.
For sure, and when you see Angstrom throwing a Moonlight and drawing an Alpha Werewolf, that's when you start to get a little bit worried for Zetrix. Although Zetrix does still have that Van Hamar in hand, so he can use that to deny the Werewolf value by, denying the Moonlight. So it's kind of going to be interesting when it comes down to the final round and how cards like Van Hamar and the Black Blood play out, especially when Zetrix has gone for this more, should we say, creative deck, considering he's running the Runestone and the Black Blood.
And just keep in mind, if you noticed a few dropped frames there, that is because this game is being broadcasted live, and that means participants' internet is potentially going to be a bit of a bottleneck. So apologies for that, but that's what you get for being able to watch one of these games completely live. This is happening right now.
For sure, we do have to commend the RuGwent tournaments, though, considering their production value. We can see the mulligan screens, we can see the choices that both players are making, and I think considering they're doing this all on the fly, I'm genuinely pretty impressed.
Yeah, I am as well. So we see Angstrom drawing into his Slizard there, and it looks like Zetrix doesn't necessarily have enough tools to win this round. Looking at the hand, it's going to be pretty hard to get it done. Keep in mind the John Calvite is at a measly 5 health after being mandraked twice, and there's just not a ton of power here. How do you think Zetrix might be able to do this?
I think it kind of comes down to the Moonlight, honestly, with the Frost. If he can end up with enough targets in the Frost, he could maybe utilize that to counter the whole Moonlight strategy and gain himself some points. But it's kind of a tricky one. He's got Kahir and Vilgefort, so he can kind of thin through his deck and try and find targets. And I think Angstrom's hand, while it does look quite strong, he's a bit limited in the what's he going to target with the Slizard? He can get a second Foglet if he has, 3, and he can get a second Alpha Werewolf. But those Alpha Werewolves aren't necessarily going to be going into, into Moonlight. Although actually now it looks like they are, as he opted for the Clear Skies over holding the Frost for Moonlight.
Yep. And of course, there's the Dagon coming out, summoning the second Foglet as well. Goes back to Angstrom. Here's the Siren for the Moonlight. And this is just going to do a great job at getting him solid value. The Poultices are actually going to be hitting solid targets. I mean, Zitrix does have one less card than Angstrom, but his cards are definitely not... they're not weak. The Novices into Poultices, or Novices into Chaining Novices, is going to give him pretty good burst value in this short round. And the Ancient Foglet in Angstrom's hand is not going to see more value than 10 either.
The difficulty also is, what does Angstrom choose to caretake? What does he target? Because he can maybe try and deny some of these slave drivers or the Witcher, for example. But if he goes for that, he doesn't really get value out of taking the Witcher because he doesn't have his own alchemy cards. And with the slave drivers, he's going to be drawing Vicavaros and more Witchers, for example. So it's not the best target for him if he wants to try and deny the Graveyard of Zetrix. He's going to be rezzing something that's kind of poor in terms of the value for him.
So Angstrom is deciding what to play here. He does have some graveyard denial tools, and the Algol, unfortunately, or the Ozrel as it's now known, is not hitting anything big and kind of deny worthy at the same time. I mean, you can clean up an Ancient Foglet from your own graveyard, or from either, but you're just playing it as a 15-point silver then. Here's the Alpha Werewolf dropping as a 14, and it goes back to Zetrix for the Kahir.
He was harboring the Black Blood, but then now looking at the Kahir into the Yarn. I'm wondering what it is he's trying to find in his deck. There's probably a specific target that he thinks will help him in this situation, although actually changing his mind and going for the Black Blood instead. And there's the Abaya.
Abaya. Yeah, I mean, that's quite a big deal if he wants to gain value out of that. Just overriding the Moonlight with the Rain itself would be pretty huge value, since there are going to be 5 more turns played out this round. He's going for the Venom instead, but he can't target the Werewolf. Oh,
made the misplay there, and should have 100% gone for the Rain. Forgot that the Alpha Werewolf is untargetable, and as a result, he's basically messed up the value there in the Arrakis Venom. Arrakis Venom hits a unit and 2 adjacent units, but if the middle unit is untargetable, you can only target the Siren or the Foglet there, and you got to be feeling a bit dumb when you make that play.
Yeah, I mean that is just that you hate to see it when that happens. Unfortunately, it actually looks like this game could be pretty close. It's possible that play might have ended up costing him the game. Here's the res on the Vikavar Novice, which is probably going to be pulling either a res or an ale. You could go for the res, especially if you're looking for something like a Viper Witcher, and you do obviously have a good target for value here with it.
Yeah, it's a strange decision, because ultimately also if he killed the Siren and the Foglet, the Alpha Werewolf would still have been getting buffed, so it's got to just be a misplay. And with Angstrom's hand, I mean, what does this Slizzard even get him? I guess like a Foglet or a Werewolf? Oh, then you are kicking yourself at this point, because you could have just rained on his parade, and instead you chose to shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, that has to hurt, and that's the kind of tell. We'll have to see if Zetrix is going to be able to recover from that. Here's the Vilgefortz. It's on the Kahir, pulling the Ale, and that's going to be a lot of points to make up. Angstrom getting 2 points a turn for 3 more turns, and he's sitting at a pretty good hand. It's going to be close, but it does look like Angstrom has this. And there's a big frisbee.
It's a big circle. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he goes for with the Caretaker. He's gone for the 10 points off the Foglet, because slave drivers obviously spawn Foglets, and if he'd managed to maintain the Fog, that would have been an even better play. And this is kind of the thing with Caretaker against the slave driver deck, is they're playing stuff that you want, and because of the changes to slave driver, sometimes there'll be a situation where you don't get a choice, so you end up picking something that ultimately is great for your opponent, as they can just take it from you.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a great match up for the slave drivers. He was able to get an Ancient Foglet in round 1. Angstrom solidly closing the game round and taking 1 round of their set cleanly there. Now, Angstrom was the winner of the RuGwent Open for January, and he performed very, very cleanly in the last tournament. He played some pretty standard decks, but he played them very well, and we'll have to see how he continues here, but he's my personal favorite for taking the tournament.
For sure. It's interesting, though, that he did choose to ban Bruver over the Spy deck. The Yan deck, the Alchemy deck, when you're running what looks like Axeman. You know, he was running Harold, but opted to ban Bruver, which I think is interesting because obviously you don't know your opponent's ban. Like, I wouldn't know that my opponent had banned Harold when I'm banning for him because you go through a middleman. So the fact that he sees Bruver as a bigger threat than something that directly counters one of his decks is interesting.
Yep. Okay, so we get into game 2, and it's going to be Engstrom's Calvite versus Zetrix's Bran. And we see off the bat here, Zetrix has a kind of Bear Talisman-style cursed deck with Ceres and Bran.
And we have a Alchemy deck on the side of Angstrom. Again, opting for the Black Blood Runestone. I mean, they are Alchemy cards, so they do give you damage on your Witchers. Your Viper School Witches, which is one of the reasons people choose to play them. But we saw in the previous game they can be very risky.
Yep. We'll have to see how this goes out. Engstrom going first here, electing to take the dry pass against the Bran, which I think is probably the best thing to do in that situation.
Yeah, getting a feel for when to make the dry pass and when not to is something that takes a little bit of practice. And certain decks do like to go first, whereas certain decks are okay. To go second, where certain decks are okay with having a proactive first play. So it's interesting with Alchemy deck, you're obviously trying to remove your opponent's cards. So going first, you very rarely have a proactive play. You can maybe play Slave Driver and hope to find something that, you know, just plays onto the board. But going against Zetrix's deck, he knows that there are kind of some risky targets in there, like the Priestess, for example, which would just be a 2-point play.
Yeah. I mean, additionally, against Bran has an inherent insurance against really losing round 1, so you got to be afraid of overcommitting and taking round 1. In many situations against Bran, you actually do rather lose round 1 if it's all the same in terms of, you know, going 1 card down to win it is not being worth it.
But on the flip side, you've then put Zetrix in control and letting Skellige have control of the length of the round is maybe risky. But on the flip side, there's nothing in Zetrix's graveyard.
Exactly.
So all of his Resurrect cards are costly. So this is one of the things I like to employ when I go against a Resurrect deck like this, is that you really want to push them round 2. Because when you push them round 1 and round 2, basically they don't have graveyard. So if they held on to Priestesses or other sorts of Resurrect, they become dead. So that gives you the advantage, and that's how you kind of overcome their sheer number of points, is forcing them into a situation where they have 1-point plays. However, Alchemy, you know, you deal a lot of damage, so you'll notice that I would imagine Angstrom will be focusing his damage onto high value targets. So rather than killing things, just damaging things.
Yep, that's exactly right. And of course, the Bran deck effectively almost controls the length of its own rounds, just because, like you were saying, it doesn't have these graveyard targets. You don't as much mind giving them control because they can't 2-round, right? I mean, he is sitting with a hand that has effectively 3 reses that he's not going to be able to play this round.
It does ultimately mean, though, for this round, he can spend his time just putting what he wants to be in his graveyard into his graveyard by playing them, and then choose to pass and have a long round with the Berserkers in order to get the high amount of value you can out of those.
Yep. And we saw something kind of cute there. Zetrix bluffing the Igni, not having it in hand, and Angstrom using Ale to counter. Here's the Spear Maiden pulling out the Bearmaster, and this is going to do a decent job in terms of catching up with Angstrom, but if you'll recall, this was kind of Angstrom's round to catch up initially, so we'll have to see what Zetrix is going to do to stay ahead here. He obviously has the Coral for the 20-point play, but this is a round where Zetrix does need to catch up to be able to pass, otherwise he is going to round 3 1 card down.
Yeah, and that's kind of tricky because Alchemy does have a lot of big point plays. I mean, they have these, you saw there, the Ale plays, and the fact that that's, you know, worth 14 points in one go, so it's a pretty strong play as well as staying in his deck. On the flip side, though, Zetrix may want to sit on this until you get to the point where Angstrom has played a lot of Alchemy cards and played a lot of Ales, such that maybe they'll hit Udalryk, and maybe Udalryk will get even bigger, which gives him even more value on his Coral.
Yep. And as we can see, Zetrix does have the pass at this point, and he does have a developed graveyard for Freya's as well. He has to be considering passing, but he could play it deeper if he wants. Could be a bit of a risk if Angstrom is able to really stay ahead and punish him. And something like the Foul Ale, and of course the high tempo plays in general that Alchemy Nilfgaard can afford, are going to put a major threat there in that way.
It could be that he just wants to try and thin his deck more, or just put more pressure on Angstrom. So rather than just regaining card advantage, he can get to the point where he can get, his own card advantage by getting such tempo. And, with the board that he has currently, he does have options for tempo with Resurrects and also with these Marauders and with Coral in hand. So he's got a lot of options to try and push his opponent in order to try and even go a card up into round 3.
Yeah, that's true as well. And of course, Angstrom needs to be able to threaten 22 points right now to keep staying ahead of Zetrix, which of course he cannot do because all he has is a Foul Ale. I mean, this is kind of how tempo is going to end up working in round 2. If Angstrom is able to stay ahead of Zetrix at any given point, if Zetrix kind of forces it out too far or starts playing a little bit slower, then he is threatening himself losing an entire card, because if he can't stay ahead of Angstrom for the pass, Angstrom doesn't have to play a card after the pass, and that completely makes the difference. That's basically going to be deciding the game here.
Yeah, so what that means to me is that we're going to be seeing a lot of tempo plays coming out of both players going forward until Zetrix maybe decides that he can't keep the edge, because he does have to try and stay ahead one card down, because otherwise he will be going into the final round one card down, and we saw how that ended in the previous game.
So it's up to Zetrix exactly how he wants to handle this. He did get his Ceres out this turn as opposed to last turn, and maybe that's what he was fishing for, but it looks like he wants to keep pressing this even deeper. He has the Jenge to develop if he wants to potentially draw the Sigdrifa, because of course he only has 7 cards left in his deck to draw it. Good odds of getting it, and developing this will give you value.
Jenga's also really nice here, because you'll notice the 2 units he targeted weren't cursed, which gives him 2 extra points for each of those Berserkers. The way they work is they get buffed by 1 per cursed unit and 1 per damaged unit. And cursed and damaged units only count for 1. So those damaged bears, which are cursed, will only count for 1. But the fact that Cantarella got hit by the Foul Ale and that he targeted Ceres and the Battle Maiden means that he's actually got 3 more points onto those Berserkers.
Yeah, he's pushing this deeper. It's actually interesting. It's possible that Zetrix is going for a res denial strategy despite being the Skellige deck in this situation. I mean, he knows that Angstrom is sitting on those poultices, and his Freyas and Restores are actually somewhat getting enabled just by the virtue of units dying. It is actually possible he is intending to really try to force Angstrom out on this round. I mean, he has res targets.
Yeah, interesting to see, because the thing is, Zetrix does have the res targets and Angstrom doesn't, and because Angstrom's deck is all about hitting Zetrix, he's almost giving him res targets, whereas Zetrix's deck is not a damage deck at all. So Angstrom is not getting the res targets that he needs.
Exactly. The only unit getting removed from Angstrom's board is getting turned into a Jade figurine instead of actually dying. There's the Ale, providing another 17-point target. Now, if you're Angstrom, you might be a little afraid that an Igni is coming down, but of course we know that's not happening. It's going to be up to Zetrix how he wants to play this out, but as you'll notice, Angstrom was able to stay ahead in points. So it is very, very possible that he might try to maintain that, but that's going to be extremely difficult against these huge Berserker Marauders slapping the board.
Yeah, the Berserker Marauders are nothing to turn your nose up at. Bear in mind that Papa Vesemir probably does have him. Oh, actually, he's got Mandrake in hand. I was going to say Papa Vesemir is going to find us up at Mandrake, but he's got Mandrake in hand, so he can deny the third one to a large extent. But considering it's 19, then 20, then 21, it's going to be really hard for Angstrom to catch up, especially then with Coral as well onto a 17. And you'll also notice that Zetrix playing him has then thinned his deck even further. So then at this point, he's looking more and more likely to find that Sigdrifa, which is then going to give him a huge res in Jenga.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. It looks like Angstrom is basically doomed to go to round 3 on even cards against Zetrix, which may mean that Angstrom's best bet is to use something like Mandrake on Calvish here. This round is not going so well for Angstrom.
But I think if Angstrom uses Mandrake on Calvish, then Zetrix will push for a 2-0. Like with the hand that Zetrix has, it's going to be very, very hard for Angstrom to catch up, and especially catch up in 2 cards. It could get to the point here where he's so far ahead that it basically puts Angstrom in a really awkward position, especially with 2 ointments in hand and not much in the graveyard. I mean, admittedly, Zetrix has a Freya and a Restore, so probably is unlikely to play those, but I think he's going to play them. He's definitely going to play Coral, and I think he's definitely going to play the Marauder, because at this point, you're not going to have a board this full, and you're not going to be able to play, a 21-point Marauder in the next round. So you may as well play in this round and really put pressure on your opponent.
Yeah. No, this is a dicey position for Angstrom. He may just, in fact, be regretting the turn 1 dry pass. I mean, it's a great move, but it can absolutely fall apart to a hand state like Zetrix has here.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see that Zetrix turned the whole dry pass around on its head, and it's, come back to bite Angstrom in the butt.
We see treason.
Treason makes 2 units fight each other, I believe, like 2 adjacent units.
Yeah, they have to be adjacent. And there it is, the Jenge into the Berserker Marauder. Now this will provide another damaged unit, removing a cursed unit, but it will allow the Freya to bring it back. Again, it's Angstrom's reses that are being bricked here.
Yeah, it's interesting that he opted for that kind of fight as opposed to using the bear into the Jenga, because that is also a valid option. And I mean, priestesses are typically, I mean, we've seen him res bears as well, so I guess it was kind of a 50-50. You don't know what's in Zetrix's hand, but in the current state of the game, like, Zetrix must be really happy about that, because he's just going to res another gigantic Marauder, and, Angstrom is running out of power plays.
Yeah, I mean, the Runestone effectively traded for this Freya, almost 1-to-1. There's the Mandrake coming out, but here's the Freya for countering. If he wants to play it, to use the last bear here, and he won't have a target for the Restorer, which is probably his only regret. He is pushing this deep. He has conceded he is not getting Ceres back in round 3 by dumping that Freya out there, just to put even more pressure on Angstrom. This is a play that says, I know you're sitting on some poultices, and I'm going to see exactly how much I can do in terms of just forcing you out this round.
Realistically, though, it's not a huge issue that he doesn't have Ceres, for example, and that he doesn't have Freya's, because he's got that restore, and he can use the restore on the Beastmaster. Actually, kind of unfortunate for him there that the overdose didn't hit any of those 1-strength Beastmasters, because then he would have had a restore target, and then I think he definitely would have pushed for the 2-0. But as it is, I'm not.
I think this 2-0 is happening.
Catch up.
This
I think
2-0
it could
definitely
happen anyway.
happening. Yeah, the poultice we just saw there has no targets, not a single unit in Angstrom's graveyard, and this second round is going to go to Zetrix, a super clean 2-0, winning by 50 points.
Yeah, you see him there using the heal on the fidget spinner, as I sometimes like to call it, the bone talisman, and 2-0. Congratulations to Zetrix. After a misplay in the first game, he comes back swinging.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty surprising to see out. We'll have to see how the next game shapes up, but it's actually going to be much more of an even matchup than I would have expected.
Yeah, I think kudos to Zetrix. He played that game perfectly, and we were talking about, the strength of a dry pass and how to use it, and I guess that goes to show you how not to use it, because dry passing, like we said, is good against decks where you need a graveyard, but Alchemy also needs a graveyard, so Alchemy dry passing into Skellige is maybe a bit of a risky strategy. And
well, most players don't try to counter Alchemy in that way. There's a huge mentality to, really deny Skellige when you get that opportunity, deny their graveyard reses, but most players wouldn't have taken the opportunity to do that against Skellige. It really comes down to Zetrix's call to do that there, and the real payoff at the end was when he declined his own Ceres opportunity to commit to that 2 round. And here we are.
Yeah, I think it's a tough matchup going into it, just because Alchemy, it kind of plays into Skellige's strategy, because you're damaging his units, or you're killing his units and giving him graveyard grief. So it was going to be a tough matchup, I think, for Angstrom. But as it is, we now have the mirror, and the opener is Counterella. So he has to choose which of these cards he'd like to place on the bottom of his deck.
Yeah.
This is not the best Counterella choice.
Yeah, that is a tough one. I mean, the Vilgefortz kind of allows you to play a little earlier, but Alchemy doesn't really have enough thinning. You are never gonna see this card again, whatever you choose. There's the Kahir, so Vilgefortz goes bye-bye, but he does have a more secure round 3 game plan here.
That is true, and also having the option there to reverse the coin flip means that Zetrix is now kind of in the reactive position, which for an Alchemy deck is somewhere that you want to be.
Yeah, Absolutely. These slave drivers, of course, are going to be hitting huge value in the mirror because they will be pulling cards that you yourself put in the deck, sometimes spawning more Viper Witchers as well. And, of course, we see extra slave drivers in Zetrix's hand. What do you think about these hand states? Obviously, these decks are very, very similar. I don't know if Zetrix has the Foul Ale. Extremely similar decks, however. Who has the favorite hand here?
It's hard to say just because Angstrom has a lot of thinning, and thinning is nice, but on the flip side, Zetrix has the slave drivers, which is going to give him Viper Witches, which are worth more points. Because the thing is, with novices, you can play too many, especially in the mirror. If your slave drivers are giving you novices, like, yes, you're thinning your decks and you're getting those ales out of your decks, but you have a limited number of ales and a limited number of ointments. So you have to be very careful that you don't end up in a situation where you have 2-point bronzes. So I would say that I think Zetrix has a bit of an edge in terms of the hand, especially as like he's got Vesemir to draw into Mandrake, whereas Angstrom is sitting with Mandrake in hand, which means that if he does play Jan, then if he wants to Mandrake Jan, he's going to make a 6-point play.
Exactly. At the same time, though, I mean, Mandraking Yan is already putting yourself at a bit of a disadvantage here. It's going to come down to how the ale swings, but we could be seeing a pretty huge Mandrake on both sides if the ale hits a single card even just 2 or 3 times.
And actually, what you could do here with Vesemir is you could banish Jan, and that way he no longer has value in Cahir, and I really like that as a play.
Yeah, I mean, he could be going for that. He's certainly thinking about it. The one issue with the play is it's extremely low tempo, and it could actually allow Angstrom to pass. Here's the Mandrake banishing Yan. It costs him 1 point, and he's threatening this 20 here. Will we see a pass come out from Angstrom? He might actually think that Zetrix can't take this. I mean, this is the kind of tempo that really, you're very much on the brink. I mean, Jan Calvite pulling something like a Viper Witcher, if the Viper Witcher deals 10, and I think it's a 9, would take it.
He's also got Jan into Slave Driver, into pass. Novice, into Alchemy.
He needs to
so he has to go Jan here.
The Viper Witcher, does it do... It only does 9, and that's not going to be enough. It's a tie, 1 card down. You hate to see that. Now, the play from Zetrix to use the Vesemir on the Mandrake on the Calvite was, I think, fantastic, but with only 1 slave driver left in your deck, the odds of hitting it off the Calvite are low, and it's the only thing that can do it. I think the pass from Angstrom there was superb, and it does a great job of just forcing Zetrix out of the round and punishing him for the Mandrake play.
Yeah, he took a risk, and ultimately it didn't pay off, and that's kind of one of the things with Jan, is you're not always going to see exactly what you want. On the flip side, though, it does mean that his Jan cannot be Mandraked.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a devastating pass, though. I think the pass mechanic is probably one of the true signs of a master at this game. Being able to just pass very reliably in situations that will absolutely force the opponent out.
So do you think you have to take a dry pass here if you're 2 cards down?
You may have to. I think it's probably the best play to. I mean, it's risky playing deeper. If you play anything, if he plays the Asir, it's met with the Viper Witcher, and he has a hard time of staying ahead at that point. You gotta take the dry pass.
I think Zetrix was considering the Asir into Cantarella, because I believe if you put Cantarella back into the deck, it becomes a negative 13-point play, because her timer's already triggered. So if you draw into her, that means you're putting 13 points on your opponent's board, and with a dead Cahir as well in Angstrom's deck, it is something that Zetrix definitely was thinking about there when he was looking at his opponent's graveyard and hovering the Fringilla.
Yeah, I think that's a good call for sure. But it's when you're thinking about it, it's just such a risk, because not being able to stay ahead and being pressured into a round where you're down on cards is just the worst thing, especially when both decks are so reactive in this case with the Viper Witchers.
Yeah, plus he does know that Angstrom hasn't played his own Cantarella, so it may be the case that he Fringillas that Cantarella into Angstrom's deck on the next turn, on the off chance that Angstrom chooses to play Cantarella and draws into it. Although he would get a choice.
All right, so we take it to round 3. Angstrom having 1 extra card over Zetrix, and in Gwent, that is a big deal. We'll have to see how it works out here. It's possible Angstrom could find a Bricked Cahir, which could even the odds a bit. Finds the Cantarella instead.
Yeah, and Cantarella will give him a choice. So here, even if he does find the Bricked Cahir with the Cantarella, he can just choose the other card.
So we'll be playing this out. Angstrom effectively kind of flipping back the coin on Zetrix, finding his last slave driver there. And of course, I mean, the name of the game in this matchup is slave drivers. If you find 3 slave drivers and your opponent doesn't, you'll be at a huge advantage.
Yeah, it's interesting here to see what Zetrix chooses to put into his opponent's deck or put back into his deck, because he could have opted to put cards into his own deck and maybe given himself more novice targets, but ultimately choosing to make Angstrom's graveyard a little bit less favorable. Although I'm not really sure why he chose to put Cantarella back in.
Yeah, I mean, there's not too much purpose for it at this stage in the Alchemy Mirror. There's not really any card that would end up, like, bricking.
Because realistically, Angstrom's not drawing anymore. I mean, unless he had, like... Would that even work? No, I was going to say unless he had Wakim, but Wakim wouldn't pull a Cantarella. Yeah. That would be hilarious, but I don't think that works like that.
Yeah, boost it by 10 as well. Just make it a 23-pointer.
Yep. Just for fun. But here we can see the spell chaining that is quite common, especially in this mirror, because you can go into a slave driver and then go into a novice and then draw another spell. But you do have to be careful with these alchemy cards, that you don't draw too many.
So there's the Ale quickly out from Zetrix. He's 2 cards down in this round 3, but of course he is 27 points up. It's going to be Angstrom trying to effectively keep up here. He does have the Foul Ale, and in this matchup, or I mean, whenever the Foul Ale can find value, it finds pretty good value. I mean, you're always happy to see that 18-point silver that's enabling your Viper Witchers as well.
Yeah, and when you're playing against Alchemy, Alchemy has to stack rows because you're running Ale. So you're playing into their Foul Ale, which is just, you have to do it because ultimately it's part of your win condition. And if you tried to play a single row strategy, that's not going to pay off.
Yep. So it is back to Zetrix here. We're going to have to play this one out. Both players sitting on Venhemar that I am sure they just want to use for the overdose potion in this case, unless a row gets developed quickly enough to try to go for a frost in one end, in which case I'm sure we'd just see that cancel out with a clear weather immediately.
Yeah, I think it would just they'd just even each other out. We see Zetrix going for the... This is exciting.
Do you do it?
No, because Viper Witcher can kill it, so it's not worth it.
Yeah,
and
but Venhemar is just quite awkward
sad Venhemar.
Well, the thing is, though, is that since it's Alchemy and since it's Mahakam Ale, you are getting more than 9 points for this Venhemar because he has to develop that Seadro to get value out of his Ale.
But he has Venhemar so he can clear. But the problem is, then he could play another Frost. So the Venhemar's not bad in that you're kind of baiting out their clear here, but ultimately... It's kind of a shame in that there was only 2 targets, which means he didn't have the option to overdose. So he kind of was forced into that position because Hefty Helga's not really great in this situation. And Fake Theory, you can just kill. This is the thing with Fake Theory is you just kill it with Viper, which is because you don't actually have to target an enemy. You can just target any unit.
So here's the counter runestone coming out from Angstrom. We'll have to see if this one is able to counter Venhemar, pull a Fake Theory of his own. It could be anything coming out of this except for Cantarella.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he opts for in this situation. And it's Fringilla. Not Fringilla.
Yeah, it's the Asir putting back a couple extra cards. Now, we weren't able to catch what those cards were.
No, we don't know what his alternate options were, but Asir is a
he's
solid
going for
11
the second
points.
Frost. If he does that Venhemar from Angstrom is going to be devastating, clearing both Frosts at once. He's thinking to himself, this Angstrom guy, would he really have not cleared with his Venhemar unless his attempt at going for the runestone was his attempt to clear?
But it's so greedy because if you look at the number of cards left, there's 8 cards left, so it's only 4 more points. It's only 4 more points than an overdose at max targets. So I think it's too greedy to go for a Venhemar in that situation, even though it is very enticing.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, Angstrom, he is, as we know, sitting on his own Venhemar, and he just has more points available to him. He's sitting comfortably 2 cards up, very much in control of this situation, and it's going to be up to Zetrix's kind of swing cards like Coherence Calvite or Black Blood to try to swing it back in his favor.
I mean, he's 2 cards up, but he is 20, well, 18, well, 16 points now. 16 points down. That's 1 card up. Plus, he has no counter for this Frost coming, and that does play against his whole strategy with the Ale. So I think Zetrix does stand a chance.
Yeah, that's true as well. It could be pretty close. You have Black Blood pulling from a few options. Obviously, one of the Ghoul type cards would represent a 15 or a 16. Abaya is not necessarily going to be hitting too much here. I mean, it's definitely too late for something like Rain to really get full effect.
On the flip side, though, I believe Angstrom has Vesemir into Black Blood as well, so he might try and roll an Abaya just to get rid of this Frost.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a possibility. I mean, both players have almost identical decks. The one thing is we have not seen the Foul Ale in Zentrix's.
No, we haven't seen much in the way of Foul Ale on his side of the board. He's just kind of spamming out those Viper Witches. And I think that's generally a safer strategy, especially if you haven't seen Mandrake. You'd rather not, make a really big fat target for Mandrake. So I think with Zetrix opting to, take Viper Witches off of Slave Drivers, for example, and opting to res those is a favorable choice.
And one of the nice things, if you are Angstrom, is the Frost does give you infinite reses on Slave Drivers. If he does want to keep playing Slave Drivers and keep putting them in the Frost, he can keep using his poultices on them, which, give you potentially an extra free point, which is a big deal. There's the Black Blood on the Catachan, and this is going to erase the Frost entirely.
Yeah, we see the Catachan now. He plays Moonlight, so we got some Moonlight. We don't have any beasts, but it does deny, 5 or so
the Catachan itself is a vampire. It's going to be growing off that itself, unless, of course, it gets met with a very, very unfortunate fate.
I mean, it was kind of predictable, with this whole Moonlight situation. You play a 5 into Moonlight, then, he's going to die in this kind of matchup. But honestly, denying, 10 points of Frost is, I would say, worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are kind of sinking, you're making your opponent lose effectively 4 points there off the Witcher as well, because you have to kill a target that's not necessarily worth it. So that's still pretty good value off the Black Blood. Now, Zetrix does have his own Black Blood that he could have countered with. He went with the Witcher instead. We're going to see exactly what he does with his Black Blood, because that's the biggest variable looking at all of this.
Yeah, I mean, Angstrom has a lot of points in hand. He's got that Foul Ale, which is 18. He's got a couple of novices, depending on what it is that he's got available for them. We'll have a brief look here. Unfortunately, we can't see both of them, but he's definitely got targets. So he's going to be, rezzing, and he's going to be thinning, and he's going to be start shooting Zetrix soon enough. Although Zetrix, the biggest target on his board is a 6.
Here's the Slave Driver, and yeah, that's gonna come back to hurt him. Just like you were saying, Zetrix keeping very, very low strength units, and that Viper Witcher Angstrom found was just not able to find value. On the other hand, Zetrix is killing at the least this 8 strength Van Heemer, which feels just a little bit better, and you might have been right. Zetrix actually has a pretty good stand into this round.
Yeah, there's not really a good Mandrake target, for example, on the side of Zetrix. You could maybe heal the Asir, and that's, an 11-point play, but that still doesn't feel so good. The Ale, admittedly, is going to be at, 17 at the moment, and he's got Slave Driver and he's got a Novice, so provided that Novice has a target, that's pretty good. But Zetrix has Kahir into Yan into a choice of 3,
yeah,
and
exactly.
It really also depends what Black Blood offers, because Black Blood, it can be very impactful.
And one of the biggest issues is the Mandrake as well, just because Zetrix is playing kind of so low to the ground, and his biggest units are very small. You're not going to see more value out of that Mandrake than just healing up your Asir, which is not really what you want to get.
For sure, and the thing is, it's starting to get the point also with Angstrom where he can't really choose novices because he's played so many. I feel like he doesn't have that many Bronze Alchemy cards left in his deck. But let's see what the options are. Ooh, Stefan. So he could put the Vilgefortz back on the top of his deck and then not draw into it.
Okay, so we see the slave driver coming out from the Calvite, and he can just keep poking. He does, of course, see a Viper Witcher, but without any real targets, he might just have to choose the Novice instead if he has any alchemy cards left to pull, and hope it gives him something just a little bit better. Of course, the Ale in this case will go a ways towards enabling some of the tools that Angstrom has if he wants to play more Witchers, or maybe get some kind of Mandrake value, but still nothing big enough for that. And this is looking very bad for Angstrom here.
Yeah, now it's a perfect time for Ale for Zetrix because it's right after all of the Viper Witchers have come out. I mean, admittedly, Angstrom doesn't know that, and potentially there is one more Viper Witcher attached to that Novice, depending on what's in the graveyard and what's left in the deck. But it doesn't make the Mandrake any stronger. It doesn't make the Foul Ale any stronger. So with 34 points ahead, I don't know. That's a mighty mountain for Angstrom to climb.
Yeah, and it's also going to come down to what this Black Blood is pulling from Zetrix. He's saved it for last. He does have something big munching on Asir, potentially. He could be hitting his own Catachan. There's not really a good field for Blood Moon here. He is pulling it out. We do see the Ozrel. This has the option for the, is it 18-point play if there's a Cantarella in the graveyard?
But he put the Cantarella back in.
Yeah, no Cantarellas are in the graveyard here. He's got to go with the 16 eating the Asir.
That's got to feel bad. You know, you put that back in. You chose to make that decision. But I think it's enough because if he does, I mean, the Foul Ale will make the 18-point difference, right? So it comes down to Mandrake versus this card. Mandrake versus Black Blood. And this Black Blood, when he goes... Although, actually, no, because the Mandrake will reset it. So it's not.
Exactly. But he can choose the Catachan for Blood Moon. He's going for it. He's thinking about it. It's less points, but it does not enable a Mandrake target for Angstrom. An amazing call by Zetrix. And here's the Blood Moon. This is going to only get 8 points. Unfortunately, can Angstrom make this?
So he's got 5 points plus the 8, right?
Yes.
And the Mandrake is worth 6 plus 5, 11. So I believe this is Zetrix's game. There's not a big enough target for the Mandrake.
Yeah, the Mandrake is just going to be 11. Man, that Blood Moon, even though he played it for less points, predicting the Mandrake from hand allowed Zetrix to win by 2 points. Another fantastically played game by Zetrix there. Wow.
That's fantastic. Like, if he'd gone for the greedy play, he would have lost.
Yeah.
So ultimately, by playing safer and knowing that Mandrake was definitely something that could be played, that allowed Zetrix to win, and you got to commend the player for that, making a smart choice, and rather than going for max points, going for safe points.
Yeah, I mean that is the second time. Don't worry about it. That is the second time we have seen Zetrix making an amazing hand read call from Angstrom there. The first time, of course, being just last game where he was calling the poultice and went all in on the round 2.
Yeah, I do hope these are being streamed with a delay, seeing as this is live, because sometimes when you see good calls like that, you got to be a little bit, suspicious. But here we have.
Nobody ever stream snipes Jaggerous.
No, nobody ever would do that. That would just be a horrible thing, and no one would ever think to do that, especially not in a tournament. Anyway, we have the Nova Monsters deck versus the Northern Realms. I believe it's Hensel. So
yes.
Angstrom's Hensel versus Dagon Monsters, and this is a Nova variant, whereas previously we saw a non-Nova variant, I believe, because it had 25 cards.
Yep, and of course Hensel decks being, I think, one of the best decks in the format. Its play rate is not super high outside of like the top ranks, I would say, but it is a extremely powerful deck, probably Northern Realms' finest, and we see a pretty early opening here, both players playing out their 7-point engines, and it's just going to be a stage of development at this point.
Yeah, winning the coin flip for Angstrom is, something that you love to see as a Hensel player. It means that everything that he can choose to play is going to be reactive. Interestingly, running a Margarita. How do you feel about Margarita as an inclusion in a Northern Realms deck?
I've seen her around pretty well. She kind of fills that last spot that you don't really have an answer for just as a reset. I mean, she's probably the one luck card that you can play because she has real utility outside of that. She's sort of like a Mandrake, right? She's got the 6 points and the reset. So she's like a Shawneeable Mandrake that has a free lock. Why not?
We see the Alza's double cross in Angstrom's hand. I've got to predict that's going to be an Aneki. I mean, typically you have that for the Thaler,
Yep.
which would suggest Dunbanner. Aye, aye, sir. But with that in hand, and with our good friend, his name?
Ronvid.
Forgot. Ronvid. With our good friend Ronvid, it means that Neki's probably on the ADC. And having a targeted draw for Neki, I think, is really strong.
And if the Griffin, if this RNG's, and it kills the siege support, man, downed right away. Any Henselt opportunities or future buff potential denied right off. And that's not going to be enough of a lead for the IIs to come out.
Nope, that is exactly on 19 on the dot. And you have to remember that IIs will trigger before weather. So if Zetrix puts Angstrom on 19 before weather ticks, you get no IIs. Yep. And this is something that people find a little bit confusing because a lot of players don't take this into account, that weather ticks after II trigger. So actually, Zetrix is going to need to be on a, 20... Yeah, about a 22-point lead because of the fog.
Yeah, and it's just going to come down to kind of developing a pass here. Here's the Cyclops, and that's just going to do even more of a job of denying Angstrom's opportunity. Here come the II boys.
Yep, and you'll notice they came out just before the fog ticks. So that's something that a lot of players do get a little bit confused on, but it does mean that Angstrom's not as far behind as it was at first, and this does give him a chance to catch up, because at the moment anything that Angstrom plays, Zetrix is controlling.
Yeah, I mean, when you're able to just stay ahead like this, which Angstrom will probably be able to do for the next several turns with the IIs coming out for the 12 free points, it looks like Angstrom is basically gearing up to stay ahead on even cards. And if he can keep that game up, it will be Angstrom's game to lose at that point.
Yeah, this is the thing with Northern Realms, is at first they may have, some kind of small plays. They don't have these kind of big tempo plays that we've been seeing on the side of Zetrix straight away. But once you start to develop your board, that's when you start to suddenly deal a lot of damage. And with Henselt in your pocket for whenever you might need him, he always has that option to overcome and win the round should he want to.
Is that a Henselt in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?
Okay, I'm just happy to see you.
We see the Dow coming out now, and this is just going to represent a fantastic Griffin target. Of course, we have the Brewess Ritual, which isn't going to see too much application this round, but of course it gives him a fantastic finisher, but he's just getting bullied out by Angstrom. We are seeing the Trebuchet kind of counter the Arrakis, so Zetrix is getting 2 points a turn, but that 2 a turn is pretty slow compared to Angstrom's, just capacity to stay ahead here. And that is a fantastic Barbagazi. Huge tempo, and it enables the Brewess for this round as well.
Yeah, plus I think when you see Barbagazi, it also gives you an option to pass and just get out of the round. And it means that Zetrix losing on even is not as much of a problem, because he'd then have that carryover.
Yeah, although the Taller would absolutely be expended to effectively mitigate that and control the pace of round 3, but Zetrix, if he has a way to deal with Villain Trettenmirth, may just have the round 3 secured. I mean, that Villain Trettenmirth is really the name of the game here, because it's going to decide whether it goes off, whether the game goes to Angstrom or Zetrix. If you look at the round 3 win conditions, we have Nova, Brewess finishers, Ozreal, very powerful finishers. The coin flip is going to be, unless, of course, Zetrix has Frightener here, Angstrom has the bleed to whatever card count he wants because he has the Taller. But it's all about whether Zetrix can find a Cyclops, because when you can kill that Villain Trettenmirth, you have the better round 3. When you can't, you don't.
Yeah, and with Angstrom in the driving seat, it's going to be quite tough. And although if you look at the tools that Zetrix has, does he have a lot of options in order to actually try and kill a Villain Trettenmirth?
He has to draw into the other Cyclops in his deck. I think that's pretty much got to be it.
I mean, he's got Slizzard,
yeah,
right?
He
so he can
Slizzard.
Pull one out the graveyard, but then he needs something with 13 points to kill. And he's not going to have something with 13 points. So he's going to need to hit it twice, so he needs kind of options. And
He's got the Brewess Ritual into the Arcus board as well, which could, high roll with Griffin or something. Oh, and there's the Aeromancer being expended. That is a pretty risky thing to do against the Villain Trettenmirth.
Yeah, and I'm honestly really surprised he didn't choose to put Aeromancer at the top of your deck when, Bork is quite common in Henselt decks. You could have put that at the top of your deck, guaranteed the draw into it next round, and had the option to counter Villain Trettenmirth, because ultimately that's what you're scared of, right? You're scared of people killing your Ciri.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be basically, in this case, Angstrom pushing this round as much as he can, because of course when you have a 1-card advantage, you can effectively kind of trade down to accentuate that advantage. The difference between 2 cards and 3 cards is larger than the difference between like 7 cards and 8 cards, right? So because Angstrom has this kind of 1-card guaranteed, he's going to be bleeding down a little bit here for this Villain Treadermouth condition to hopefully win him the game.
Yeah, on top of that, he's thinned his deck down to 4 cards, which means he's very likely to find his Hensel targets. You know, if he draws into it, he can just mulligan it, assuming it's the battering rams. So he's in a pretty safe position in terms of going into round 3 with his Hensel. It turns out that he wasn't running Naneki, I believe, unless it got killed.
Yeah.
Because he's played his Elsa's Double Cross, and I didn't see a Naneki. So I guess he's drawn lucky in that regard.
Yeah, I really like Angstrom's variant of Henselt in this case. It's a little bit less standard, but it actually looks quite good in this meta, and the Naneki is a card that can be a little unreliable. It looks like Angstrom is very favored here, but Zetrix has an incredibly scary finisher if he can deal with the big scary dragon.
Yep, that Nova is, you know, it's the bane of a lot of players' existence. You see it, you know it's coming. You've lost last play, and you know that this big 22-point card is coming out. We've got the Barbagazi going out there and giving him a little bit of carryover, which gives him a little bit more pressure going into the final round. And it'll be interesting to see when Angstrom chooses to pass and how long Angstrom chooses to play this round. Also, bear in mind that Thaler is a really nice Algul target because they now go into the graveyard.
Yes, that's absolutely correct, although I don't think we'll be able to see that opportunity because Zetrix is just getting bled out of everything he has here. I mean, if you are Angstrom, you know that your Villain Treadermouth simply needs a couple of turns to go off, right? I mean, the question is, if you're Angstrom, do you play 1 turn out or 2? Because you play the Battering Ram here, your Henselt's down, but you can play an additional turn because the draw will make round 3 a 3-card round if you were to commit something like the Merkdebraki, which I don't think you'll need in this kind of situation because there's no setup for Villain Treadermouth. So you probably bleed down to 2 cards, or in Zetrix's case, he may even end up at 1 card.
I mean, does he go for the 2-0 here? Is that something that you choose to do in this matchup?
I don't think there's any need for going to the 2-0. I mean, that kind of implies playing Villain Treadermouth early, which is... It can only ever hurt your... Oh, and there's the ritual on the Archspore. That feels kind of bad, but it is necessary in a situation like this. Yeah, and Angstrom is just in a very, very dominant position here.
Yeah, Angstrom can just kind of choose when he wants the round to end, and he knows it's a Nova deck. You know, he's seen it's a 26-card deck, so he's going to sit on that Villain Treadermouth. But he could opt to play it now. I mean, he's down 18 points, though, is the thing.
Yeah.
So...
Definitely,
it's not
you take the Merkdebraki, and then it's got to be the pass, because, you know, when you're 1 card to 2 cards, or rather 2 cards to 1 card, you know, obviously, it's not as if Zetrix can pass here. He knows that the last card is going to be Nova, and he knows that if Zetrix has any hope of killing the Villain Treadermouth, he'll have to top deck into it. Subtle plug there.
Oh, going for the Siri and holding the Algul. How do you feel about that?
It's an interesting play. I mean, I suppose it's kind of necessary just to try your hardest to, like, punish. Try to generate a win condition. Maybe he hopes that Angstrom plays 1 more card and he can get a hero pass that he needs. But ultimately, it looks like a play of desperation. Because when you're 1 card down and being bled out to nothing against a Villain Treadermouth that you kind of know is coming, you are not so well off.
No, definitely not. And without a big finisher or anything, it's put him in an awkward spot. He's chosen to eat the Margarita, which I guess denies a res. But, like, why would he res Margarita?
No,
he knows it's over.
He's basically trying to offer Angstrom the tie in this case. Angstrom declines the tie, electing instead for the win. And it's going to go 2-2. That is actually a pretty exciting set of games. In the first series, we are already at game 5, and I gotta say, this one is shaping up really well so far. I mean, of the ones last month, there were 1 or 2 good sets. Some of them were imbalanced, but this is a fantastic series. We are at game 5 already. Do you have any favorites among these two?
It's hard to call. I think they've both played very solidly.
Yeah.
I've seen some, we've seen some really nice plays from Angstrom of leading his opponent and knowing when to pass. We've seen some misplays, but at the same time, we saw Zetrix play a very, very clean Skellige game, for example, and that was very satisfying to see. We have the Nilfgaard Alchemy deck here versus the Dagon, and for me, I quite like seeing Alchemy lose.
Yeah. No, I mean, this really could be, I think, anyone's game at this point. Zetrix made like 1 or 2 misplays in the first game, but he has really, really proven himself since then.
Yeah, he's just kind of come out swinging, and honestly, he's played some very, very solid games and made some really strong reads on his opponent, especially, for example, the read with the Mandrake. That was very satisfying to see. But ultimately, it kind of comes down to it's going to be interesting to see the kind of removal situation with each card. I mean, the Viper Witches, you can stop the Arcaspores, for example, you can stop the carryover, so that's going to be quite tricky. Whereas Alchemy doesn't really play anything that you necessarily have to remove. So I feel like Angstrom might have the edge in the matchup.
It's looking like it. I mean, this is effectively the kind of dethroning opportunity, because again, Angstrom did win the last Open. This is Zetrix's opportunity to kind of knock him off that throne, but it's going to be hard, as you say. These Viper Witchers do a fantastic job of completely denying the Griffin value, completely denying the Cyclops value.
Yeah, because you can't, trigger your own death wishes or kill your own death wish units if they're already dead. So this is the strategy that I imagine we'll see Angstrom play here, is just removing Zetrix's units. But that doesn't mean that we should necessarily discount him. I mean, you can see from both players' titles and borders that they're definitely competitive players, and they play a lot of Gwent. And Gwent is a card game, and it does in some cases come down to top decks and come down to chance, as we at Topdeck we know quite well. So I wouldn't write off Zetrix just yet.
Yeah, I mean, anything could really happen here, and even though Zetrix effectively does have some kind of removable engines, because they do combo with something like Griffins, Deathwish is kind of the one archetype that really doesn't mind that much when their stuff gets removed, the Mandrake banishing the Deo right off the bat.
And that hurts, because Angstrom knows that Zetrix has Slizzard, and Angstrom knows that Zetrix has the Brewess, I believe, to resurrect those Deathwish targets. So as a result of that, seeing those kind of units get banished is really,
Ooh,
really
the Barbagazi could eat the Vesemir here if he wants to kind of pull it out. Now, the Cyclops has some removal potential as a counterplay if that line happens. Barbagazi on Vesemir, playing to 10. We have the Cyclops if he wants to smash that value back in his face. But he could do a few other things here. We do see the Monster's Nest for Drowner into the Fog as well.
Yep, he can put units back into the Fog, and ultimately not playing into one of the rows does harm Angstrom's strategy. Angstrom, he wants to play those Ales, so he's going to want to have units in every row. But he can, opt to play the Novice into that row when he chooses to play the Ale. Like, he doesn't have to play into that until he chooses to play Novices. Although at the moment, no Novices to be seen, though we may be able to find one with Vilgefortz or with Jan.
Pass. Whoa, an early pass coming out from Zetrix, forcing Angstrom one card down. Angstrom does have the Barbagazi developed as well. What do you think about that pass?
I think it's a difficult one, because Zetrix can't then play a Barbagazi in the next round, because that'll put them on even.
Exactly.
And actually here, Angstrom setting up 2 Barbagazis with the Slave Drivers, and that's a 12-point carryover, 1 card down. So it's going to be incredibly tough for Zetrix to catch up in 1 card if Angstrom opts to dry pass.
And that is just some of the utility you see with all of these create cards. I mean, you have the ability to effectively play for carryover in a lot of situations. You see Elven Scout do it. You even see some Runestones, etc. do it. And it's very powerful when it works out.
The Cantarella in the hand of Angstrom, and we'll see her get played out here. It does, negate the carryover, but it gives them another card, so it doesn't matter. It's the same as dry passing, but it means that Angstrom has the choice of how long this round goes on.
It's a big deal, though, because with the... Oh, and that's such a slow play. With the carryover of the 12, the Cantarella effectively becomes a 1-point spy, and Angstrom has much more tempo. Zetrix playing effectively a 6 on the Barbagazi. If Angstrom slams something like 2 Viper Witches into that, he goes easily 1 card up into round 3, and I think that might be enough to just lock out the game.
Yep, it means once again we're seeing Angstrom in control of the length of the round, and that's quite difficult, especially with the hand that Zetrix has. You know, the fact that everything is getting removed, he doesn't really have a lot of options in his graveyard in terms of the Brewess and the Cyclops, because any time that he does slam down a Deathwish target, you know, Angstrom is quite happy to just kill it. He doesn't need to win this round, so it doesn't even matter if killing it puts him behind.
Exactly, and if Zetrix tries to develop value over time in the forms of Archispore, Woodland Spirit, Aeromancer, etc., Angstrom has the opportunity to either play for a pass or a tempo pass. Now, this Woodland is high tempo. Angstrom needs to try to get ahead here, and as we can see again, this round 2 is all about that tempo. If Angstrom can get ahead with something like a Viper Witcher, or maybe something much crazier like Vilgefortz on that Barbagazi, which honestly is not that bad, we could see a really sticky situation for Zetrix.
Yeah, he does have the card advantage already, so playing Vilgefortz onto something like the Barbagazi isn't a terrible play, considering he can then, you know, try and get tempo, and then if he gets enough tempo to the point where Zetrix can't catch up, it's like he hasn't changed the card difference at all. So it's kind of going to be interesting. Although seeing that 14-point Barbagazi, you know, you got a Cyclops in hand. You could opt to kill your 19. I wouldn't do it now, but you've got options if you want removal.
Yeah, and it's all gonna be about a point race at this point. I mean, whichever player can stay ahead will have a definitive advantage here, because Angstrom needs to get ahead and pass, and Zetrix, if he can block that opportunity out, will have an advantage otherwise going into round 3.
What does he have graveyard-wise, though, for his Slizzard? Does he have options for that?
I don't think there's anything. He has, of course, the Dow and the Archispore still, right? Or the Dow got banished by the Mandrake.
Yeah, the
but
Dow got
he still has the Archispore off the Slizzard. The problem is it's fighting for targets with the Brewess.
Yeah, and it's, you know, not a very big play. It's like 9 points. It's kind of funny saying that in Gwent. You know, 9 points, not that big of a play. How times have changed. But I think if Angstrom continues to bleed, then Zetrix is going to have a really hard time keeping up with this hand.
Yeah, it really could go either way in this case, and I gotta say, this is a really exciting situation. It feels like we're almost, I mean, this is like a finals kind of level match right here. We are on Game 5 of this first set, both players playing extremely well. We see Angstrom going for the Catachan. He can erase the fog at this point, and he can stay ahead while doing it, which is the most important thing. Here's the Moonlight coming out. We have the Aeromancer. He can re-fog as well. There it is. And Zetrix just cleanly staying ahead here.
Yeah, Zetrix needs to stay ahead, and he needs to put enough pressure onto Angstrom that Angstrom chooses to pass, because, you know, Angstrom knows that Zetrix is running a Nova deck. So what is Angstrom's big finisher that can compete with Nova? He doesn't have one, so he has to be a little bit careful about how long he pushes this round. But on the flip side, if he does push this round, it makes it a bit more awkward for Zetrix, because Zetrix, you know, he needs to find something good with the Recon and then maybe target it with the Cyclops if he's going to have good targets for Slizzard and Brewis. So if he pushes this round, then he could potentially actually force the series out.
On the other hand, though, I think Angstrom has committed a while ago to, before getting out of the round, at least kill the Barbagazi with double Viper Witchers. I think that's something that you pretty much have to do. He effectively declined the opportunity to double Viper Witcher the Barbagazi earlier, I think because he realized he was going to be pushing it longer and he could have done it later. In this case, effectively now, we saw just last turn, he was Viper Witchering the Barbagazi. I think we'll probably see a second one of those coming out off of the Ointment, because you really just don't want to give them that extra 6 points of carryover.
Yeah, I don't think he can afford to play his Cahir. That's his end game, right? Cahir into Yarn into something, which generally won't stack up to Ciri, because Ciri's 22, but usually is still pretty decent. So that's his finisher. Vilgefortz, the best target he has is a 2, so he could play Vilgefortz, but, you know, if there's something that you don't want to draw, then that's kind of awkward. And Vilgefortz is much safer after you play Cahir, because after you play Cahir, you know what's at the top of your deck. So you know what you're going to draw with Vilgefortz, so you can kind of plan accordingly.
Yep. There's the Viper Witcher coming out on that Barbagazi. And now at any point Angstrom can get out of this round. Zetrix has kind of proven that he's saying, you know, I'm going to stay ahead of you no matter what you do. Angstrom knows he is not sitting on a hand where he can say otherwise. Here's the Brewess for the double Archispore. What do you think about that play?
I think he had to do something to generate tempo, but,
yeah,
you know, is that, throwing his hand? Because that is a big play, and with
It's huge.
Vilgefortz in Angstrom's hand plus last play, if he burns that Siri, that's game.
Yeah, and Angstrom must be very happy after seeing that Brewhouse. I mean, he is not unhappy about going into round 3 on these circumstances, and it still could be anyone's game. With only one Nova as a finisher, we have the Ozrel as well. Will that be able to eat a spy in this case? It can off the Cantarella. If he wants to play big, he's going to accept that option. There's the 18 pointer. Will Angstrom be able to overcome this massive amount of points?
That is so good for Zetrix. That's exactly what he needed to see, because Mandrake's already been played, so he doesn't have to worry about that. We see the Kahir into Yan play coming out now. Ooh, what's that called? Trial of the Grasses.
That is not great options off of that Kahir at this moment, though. He doesn't have Trial or Foul Ale targets, so he will actually have to go with the Novice in this case, which doesn't feel too great.
Yep, and it means that if he does Vilgefortz, then he gets Foul Ale.
Exactly. And Zetrix knows that Foul Ale is in Angstrom's deck, and he knows there's no row punish in the form of something like an Igni or a Dragon's Dream, which a couple of people run. So he will be pretty comfortable row stacking here and making the Foul Ale a 6-point card.
In which case, with Vilgefortz, you would go for the burn on Siri, but then the question is, with what he draws, will what he draw be worth more than 9 points?
Yeah, I think Zetrix may just have a real advantage here. It looks like it might go Zetrix's way.
Yeah, I think... Oh, he's opted not to row stack. Well, that might cost him the game.
That could be very costly there. We'll have to see. This Foul Ale comes out playing for a clean 12. We have the Slizard, which can, I think, develop... There's the Ogreid at that point, and I guess you just toss away a Griffin. Nothing super substantial. So we see a 4-point difference. This Nova makes 22. Angstrom needs to make 27 with these 2 cards.
Yeah, and the problem is the Ale. Well, the Ale there, it landed on Kahir, so he's going to have to play something small if he chooses to burn his own unit, and I think, he has to burn the Nova.
And it looks like Angstrom has enough in this case. It has to be, right? I mean, yeah, if you use it on the Nova, Zetrix will not draw something big enough. I don't. So
you're down. You're down. You're pulling Foul Ale, right? So you just burn the 5 and take the Foul Ale and you win because you're only down 10. So it's Angstrom's game.
Yep, absolutely. He's just kind of making sure he's done the math right, hasn't forgotten the options. Here's the Vilgefortz on the Nova.
He went for the Nova. I mean,
maybe that's
a riskier play because he did know what he was drawing into. Admittedly, Zetrix got nothing, but ultimately, the riskier choice, giving your opponent, the chance. Although they do get a bronze, so are you going to get a 21-point bronze? Probably not.
And we see Angstrom take it away, the winner of last month's January Open. Man, that was an exciting first series to start things off with. That was crazy, actually. Taking it to Game 5, extremely close matchups, great plays on both sides.
Yeah, very exciting tournament start so far. Hopefully the next set will give us, equally interesting plays and equally interesting decks. I'm sad that we didn't get to see Angstrom's Axeman, but hopefully we can see that going into the finals, and that is something that's going to be really cool if we do get to see it. But obviously it comes down to bans, and Axeman is something that people ban a lot because they don't run weather clear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Zetrix proving himself to be a great player off that series, although unfortunately unable to effectively dethrone Angstrom. And the next match coming up will be with our 2 other participants, those being Rolton Shive and Son of Flame, and neither of us have heard of either of those people. But, maybe that's just because we're not really into the Russian scene very much.
Yeah, I don't speak Russian, so I can't really. For all I know,
they could be very good. And
I know the same amount of Russian as most Counter-Strike players, shall we say? So I'm not really.
I know the same amount as most Dota players.
Oh, there you go. See, yeah. So it's all pretty good. But what kind of decks are we hoping to see? Do we think we'll see variations in Nilfgaard, or do you think we'll see more Alchemy, for example? Do you feel that we'll
probably see more Alchemy?
Boyatel get played? I mean, I'm pretty sure. Zetrix didn't even run Scoia'tael, did he?
That's correct. Oh no, Angstrom.
Oh no, he did. He run Brewer. It was
didn't run Scoia'tael, but he
Angstrom
banned
who didn't run
Zetrix's Scoia'tael. So we haven't seen Scoia'tael yet, and I think there's actually some real potential there. We might see some slightly interesting Scoia'tael decks for the rest of the series. I think Scoia'tael is a faction that's been kind of under experimented on, of course, unless you're Pumpkin.
So, what do you think of the decision not to run Scoia'tael in a tournament like this? Do you think
it's interesting? Like I said, I think Scoia'tael is an overrated deck right now. I don't think I wouldn't bring it to a tournament necessarily, but at the same time, I mean, Angstrom had like a very, very powerful lineup, and I think it's very reasonable to not bring it to a tournament. I don't think it's necessary by any means.
Fair enough. I mean, we saw someone just win without Scoia'tael, so ultimately that's a fair consideration.
We were about to see someone win without Scoia'tael either way. Because it was banned out.
But I was going to say, ultimately, it gives you kind of more choice in what you do bring, and you're more likely to bring something that will surprise your opponent, which is always good. Because if you don't bring Scoia'tael and people expect it to be brought and banned, then maybe you're going to bring something that surprises your opponent. But on the flip side, if you don't bring Scoia'tael, people then they have a bit more choice in what they want to ban. If their strategy was ban Scoia'tael, so then they can ban your Herald decks, for example. They don't have to spend their ban on something like Brewer. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think Scoia'tael is as oppressive as it was last patch, but I still think it's a very strong deck to bring.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see how it plays out, because I'm positive we will be seeing more of it for the rest of this tournament. Angstrom will probably take the opportunity to ban it out in the future, but I expect to see at least, one or two Scoia'tael decks being played in this next set. And of course, just because this tournament is live, we have a very minor delay before we get into the next series while the players are kind of preparing, the bans are being done, etc.
Yep, everything has to be kind of set up, so we do have this
me
interim.
And Jaggerous will just have to entertain you.
Yeah, I'll put another shoe on my head or something. Oh dear, how do you feel about all the new card names? As a caster.
As a caster? I feel like Mogwai right now.
Yeah. It's okay,
they've basically, by renaming all the cards, they've turned all the casters into Mogwai. Like nobody knows what anything is called anymore.
That's okay. I think that's a good way to be. And ultimately, you just wing it. Like, so long as you sound like you know what you're talking about, no one's going to question you.
It's kind of it as a Dota player, it feels kind of nice, because I'm used to every hero having like 2 or 3 names in Dota, right? And like it's kind of neat to have kind of the option of like using alternative names, because that's kind of what Gwent is. Now that every card has been renamed 5 times, you have like 5 names you could just slap onto anything, and you can colloquially refer to things as like, Bork Doggo, or mushrooms or whatever.
This is like I can't remember what his current name is. The vampire guy. He's had about 4 or 5 names.
Wrecked? Which vampire guy? Katakan?
Oh, the Katakan.
Yeah.
What was he called before that?
He was only named like 3 times, right? He had Nekarat, Katakan, and there was a third one, I think.
Yeah, I think so. At some point he had a third one. And then at one point his ability is now on Osral. Algul, which is now Osral. Yeah, so this is the thing. So Algul is Osral that used to do what Nekarat does, that's now called Katakan.
Exactly.
Welcome to Gwent.
Yeah. But those are some of the newer cards. I mean, some of the older cards have literally been renamed 5 times.
Yeah, it gets fun, and then sometimes they change their names back. So we had Redanian Knight Elect, who is now he was Aspirant for a bit, and I think he's now Redanian Knight Elect again.
Yep, he is. they restored him in his full glory there.
And then you have Aeromancy that became Aeromancer
Vader
that became
Maker.
Vader Maker. Yeah. So just to keep us on our toes. Oh, and Shoop's Bizarre Adventures now. Shoop's Day Off.
Okay.
Sad
So here we have the bracket for the next set. As we can see, Angstrom won and is proceeding onwards. And then we have Rolton Shive and Son of Flame, who will be casting their match momentarily as soon as things get set up.
Yep. Do you want to pick a winner based on their names?
That's a tough one. I think Rolton Shive, obviously has the superior name in this case. I'm going to go ahead and go with him.
Yeah, see, I want to know who Flame is, because clearly his son is playing Gwent. But, I mean, if Flame's reputation doesn't precede him, then, You know, why would you be proud of being his son? You know, that makes me wonder. So I agree that Rolton Chevet has the edge when it comes to names, although he did opt to use an underscore.
But
And
on the other hand, like Son of Flame is definitely the edgier name, so maybe he's the one with the edge. Like maybe he's trying to communicate that.
yeah, apparently Rolton is a Russian noodle brand. So
Oh.
there you go. That,
You know
that makes
what?
that even.
That makes that even better. I gotta say,
Yep.
this Rolton Chive guy, he definitely has my vote in. I'll call it right
I
there.
agree. Yeah, now I just want some noodles though. This is the problem with anyone who's named after food. I'm like, if people are like, oh, do you want, like, you know, if someone posts about donuts or something on
Yeah.
Twitter, and then I'm like, I want donuts. Like that was basically what happened with CDPR when they had Fat Thursday. So in Poland, there's this Thursday before Lent where everyone eats donuts,
Yeah.
and that's a tradition. And then they were all posting about eating donuts, and I was
And
like,
they-
man, I want to eat some donuts now.
Yeah. They got
So
stuck
I
in
did.
the
I went and bought
servers and the
donuts.
patch got delayed.
That's why the patch got delayed. They were too busy eating donuts. Like, that's fair, to be honest. Like, I forgive them if that was the case.
I gotta
Like,
wonder
that's
what
a valid reason.
I gotta wonder what the two Russian casters are talking about right now. Like, do you think they're also scrambling for stuff to say because they're setting up the next round? Maybe they're also talking about like donuts
Oh,
and
they've
noodles.
probably gone to intermission and they're like off, you know, getting some Rolton noodles, for example, and we don't know because we have them muted. So they're probably like left,
Well,
and we're just sitting here like
yeah.
filling time.
Yeah, no, that's true as well. I mean, me and Jaggerous. Oh God, there it goes. Okay. Well, thank God. Okay, so we get into our first set and we see the list, which they've probably been talking about this entire time, but we haven't seen. So we have Eithne from Rolton Chive, a pretty interesting choice. Wow, I love the deck this guy's brought versus, it looks like a relatively standard Ballista Hansel Scorch variant with Drought as well from Son of Flame HS.
Dothraki Heatwave. Or Cathraki
Dothraki
Heatwave.
Heatwave?
I can't remember the first word. It begins with a K, but I always call it Dothraki Heatwave because it sort of sounds the same.
Corinthier or something.
Corinthia is a monsters
I
card.
don't know what Dothraki is from Game of Thrones.
Oh, it's fine, it's fine. So we didn't see any Scoia'tael bans, which we did talk about here. So that's kind of going to be interesting. Although Ida in the hand of Rolton and Son of Flame actually opting to throw the Karathi Heatwave, and as a result of that, you know, that Ida will maybe be used for removal to deny a Hensel target. I don't know.
I mean, the most interesting thing about this matchup is that both players have like hard Scorch decks, right? Son of Flame's got the Ballistas to line up with the Scorch and the Villain Treadmirth. Rolton Chive is using like a Scorch alignment. Like this is like the triple, possibly even quadruple Scorch Eithne deck, it looks like, coming out from Rolton with the Archers to align as well. So literally the name of the game, play the small units, Scorch the big units, and whoever does that better is gonna be winning this matchup.
But if you're playing a Scorch deck, picking the 10-point elf there from the Scout is maybe not the strategy that you want to employ.
Oh, it's definitely possible as well. And yeah, the Villain Treadmirth from Rolton's hand as well. Yeah, we're going to be seeing a lot of Scorches this game.
Yep, it's likely to be the case. So, I mean, I love watching units get scorched. I especially like when someone's own unit gets scorched, as long as it's not mine. So we'll kind of have to wait and see how this one works out. And also what happens with the Drought, because Son of Flames has Drought in his deck, and Rolton has Ida in hand. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game, because I think as soon as you see an Ida play, you know that you're safe to now start throwing weather out. Although Rolton opting to roast stack, so that even if he kept the Drought, the Heat Wave, it wouldn't have been so powerful.
Yeah. Okay, so we see it going back to Son of Flame now. It's going to be pretty hard in a situation like this to get out the IIs. Do we know that he's running the IIs in his deck? Because some players are electing to cut it in their variations.
We don't know.
I think if you're running Alzur's Double Cross, I think it's got to be the IIs, for sure.
Yeah, generally that seems to be the case. Although he has a lot of bronze units. I mean, we have the Siege Masters, the Battering Rams, and the Ballista. So I don't know exactly how much space there is. It honestly depends what he's kind of gone for, and whether he needs the IIs. Is it something that you necessarily need in this sort of deck when you're removing all of your opponent's points? Like, is there ever going to be a situation where you're that far behind?
Oh, it's possible there's not. And here's Rolton Chive just roast stacking even harder. He's got these 6s developed, but of course there's no way to punish that from Son of Flame's hand, unless of course like 4 Scorches get dropped. And it looks like most of the Scorches are going to be coming later.
row stacking is really nice when you have the trebuchets in order to deal damage to rows. So this is actually quite nice for Son of Flames. He's been able to weaken a bunch of units into battering ram range without necessarily even having to play any battering rams.
Yeah, and I mean, just rolling that one trebuchet that's just dealing a ton of damage there is fantastic for Son of Flame.
Yeah, what do you think about Baron? You know, is this potentially a Baron deck if we saw the drought?
Probably not. I don't think it could be. I mean, that would be pretty crazy. I mean, running a Baron with multiple Scorch effect, because we did see the Scorch in Son of Flame's hand that he mulliganed away.
Yeah, I think when you have Ronvid, you don't necessarily want to be holding on to a Scorch. Although I think, he's got Thaler, so did he have Thaler when he threw the Scorch?
Yes.
So that's an interesting choice, I guess. You choose not to hold the Scorch, even though you can play your Spy and give yourself a target.
Yeah, it's just got to be a matchup call, I think, especially if you predict a Yavin coming out as well, and a situation where you need to push round 1. And again, we find ourselves in just a little bit of a tempo race. Like, as long as Rolton Shive is able to stay ahead, of course, after winning the coin flip, if you can stay ahead every turn, then you can kind of bully your opponent out of the round, because of course they have to keep playing. They can't pass and lose on even, and if you can stay ahead, then eventually they'll have to pass.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Rolton chooses to play into this round with 2 double crewman pockets just sitting on the side of Son of Flames, because that gives a lot of power to his machines when he chooses to play them, and he's chosen to weaken those guys, which is good because they can't repair themselves, but he hasn't damaged the pockets in any way. I mean, maybe he's trying to force Son of Flames to play his Henselt.
It's definitely possible. I mean, Son of Flame is pretty decently comfortable here. He can kill the Neophyte off with this guy, and of course these pockets are just giving him pretty great value. He knows that one Ballista is going to align a ton of things. He may just elect to kill one of the 3 strength units here, because otherwise he will be kind of ruining his own alignment with the Ballista potentially, and he's just able to stay ahead pretty well. I mean, Rolton is trying to put pressure on him, and Son of Flame is basically not really feeling it yet.
But I think if you're Rolton, if Son of Flame, as soon as he plays the Ballista, you just pass, because at that point, he's played 2 Henselt targets. So I feel like at that stage, you want to kind of put those in the graveyard and hope he doesn't have Shani.
Yep. So there's just another archer. That's going to be killing the weekend. And of course, we saw Son of Flame use the pocket that was attached to his weaker crewman that just got killed off. So he still does have the other crewman pocket remaining on the other side. And for the first turn, in a couple of turns, he does actually have the opportunity to pass if he wants to. Of course, there's no reason to do that here, because you can spit out this Ballista and put some serious pressure back on Rolton. There's the smash from that. 23 points up. We'll have to see what Rolton does in this case. It's definitely too late to drop something like Yavin, so he might feel like he's getting forced out unless he wants to commit this other archer.
Yeah, I think it was a misplay by Rolton to prioritize damage on the left-hand siege expert rather than the middle one, because if he'd taken out the middle one, he would have denied a pocket, and ultimately, I mean, he's killed both of them now, but if he'd focused on the middle one, like I said, it would have denied a pocket rather than killing the one on the left, because by damaging the one on the left, it meant that Son of Flame could utilize the left-hand pocket and then use the right-hand pocket for the Ballista, and Son of Flames is 12 points ahead here.
Yeah, and one pocket is a big deal. So we have the Henselt, obviously. In the Henselt matchup, I mean, the game does kind of revolve around the Henselt. You'll see Rolton Shive is keeping the Ida in hand, and he has the Itany for Zap as well. So if it comes to a short round 3 scenario with the Henselt intact, he might be like double zapping targets to deny the Henselt. And of course, we see the Henselt being preserved. So both players are just aware that the game is kind of revolving around the Henselt in this way and getting it out in the round 3. Oh, but Son of Flame looks like he's committing it. This is going to obviously have a huge impact. He will be able to force this round. This round is completely spoken for at this point, as the Henselt just smashes everything that Rolton had. And we have to see a pass here.
Does committing the Henselt though, do you think that means it's a Baron deck? I don't know. Like, I want it to be a Baron deck. That's that's the dream. But
I mean, it could be, but it's going to get scorched. Even if he plays it last, because it's got the Bork.
Yeah, on the flip side though, because Son of Flame has, there's the IISO, so we know the answer to that question. Because Son of Flames has the Ronvid, if he opts for the spy play, the spy mirror isn't actually gonna give it's if one plays the spy and the other plays the spy, I was gonna say Son of Flames will still have the point advantage, which would force another card out of Rolton, but actually just opting for the dry pass and choosing to play that spy on round 3, which I guess is a Scorch block.
We also have the Vanilla Thunder in Rolton Chive's hand, which is pretty interesting. It could imply that there's an Aethlin as well. Not a card you typically see, and there's the Ida just kind of being played out.
Ida is very exciting to see if you're running Drought.
And there's the Icers. Now, these Icers are going to have a bit of a problem coming out, and there's the Scorch as well. So we see 3 Scorches in Rolton Chive's hand, and that's without Eithne as well. And Son of Flames draws the muzzle. Now, that is not a great muzzle in this situation.
No, not at all. There are basically no targets for it.
I mean, you could find an Elf with Outlaw for it, but if that muzzle is a 0-point card, you are a and there's the Baron!
I told you. Baron deck. This is very exciting. But he doesn't have a way of drawing it.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, that's...
It's like a Baron deck with no Baron.
Wait, who wins this? This is such a weird scenario. I mean, we're seeing just an absolute ton of Scorches, but they're both hitting either kind of nothing or the spies. The muzzle... Both players have, like, almost completely bricked hands.
Well, like... Isn't Rolton going to be in a situation where he can't play his Scorches? Because if he plays his Scorches, he'll kill his Borg.
Yeah.
So he has to last play Borg.
Yeah. But he'll play it for value there. I mean, with Son of Flame just not having any points to really develop on his own, I mean, Muzzle is completely useless. Karathi Heatwave is pretty bad. He'll have to use it here, and stuff like Teruvial is just going to be invulnerable. It really just comes down to who actually has more points to play. And it looks
maybe
like
you play Winch? Try and find a Trebuchet?
Could be. I think you got to drop the Heatwave now. I mean, obviously, Rolton has to be aware of this. He is row stacking, and that Teruvial, even if you don't know it's Teruvial, does imply that he will row stack even further. There's no reason not to drop this out here. But on the other hand, I mean, how do you develop enough points as Son of Flame here? That muzzle really stings, I gotta say.
I agree, but I think that the drought play was correct, because everything that Rolton has is about removing targets. And what does Rolton play here? You know, he can't remove anything. So he's kind of in a really awkward spot with his hand. So potentially, actually, if Son of Flames kind of identifies that Rolton's hand is all about removal and Scorches based on this play that he's about to make, then he could just play the muzzle as a dead card and put Rolton in an even more awkward spot with lots of dead.
That would be a pretty crazy read. I don't think you would ever do that, especially since you have last play as Son of Flame. You just have to hope the muzzle will eventually find something. Although, of course, we know that it won't.
But if you see an epidemic come out like that, you know that, like that's surely in some ways telling. I don't know. I think
perhaps, but it has to be just too awkward to throw out muzzle in this situation. I don't know. We'll have to see what Son of Flame does here. The Shiru on the Epidemic does deny the Battering Ram hitting the Shiru because Ronvid is down for a turn. Although, of course, Shiru is being played as a 4, so that doesn't feel much better either. This is a really, really awkward round 3 for both players here.
Yeah, I wonder if it would have been better for Rolton if he played the Shiru on a different row.
Yeah, to enable the Tullet to get damaged.
Yeah, because that enables your Scorch.
Exactly.
And the last thing you want is a dead Scorch, whereas you've put it... I mean, you can play it final card, I guess, as a third card play, but you've kind of put yourself in a more of an awkward position, and he's going to be getting the points anyway. So I think that gave him choice. I guess here is potentially an Ithlin. You've got a 12 now that you could target, or I guess Ithne into Zap.
Yeah, it could
but
be
I think
that
if you
as
play Ithne, you have to play her on a different row, because otherwise you're just burning yourself.
Oh, God. Yeah, this is such a bizarre round 3. You don't normally see this, like, Scorch matchup in this way. I mean, Son of Flame, again, both players are sitting on really, really awkward hands here. Son of Flame, it looks like this reinforcement is likely just pulling out a bronze at this point as well, so it makes it kind of very similar to the Winch in terms of value. The muzzle is nothing. The Batting Ram is the most valuable card in either player's hand here outside of the Ithne.
I mean, what he could do is if he can get enough damage on Thaler, he could muzzle him.
That's true. It would always result in like some kind of scorch effect, and that is definitely telling. I mean, the fact that you zap that Naneki twice instead of going for the higher value Naneki and Yavin, it is telling that something is up with the Scorch in the hand. At the same time, it looks like Rolton Shive, by committing the Ithlin to the ranged row, he is kind of doing maybe what you were saying, although a couple turns late, where he is kind of realizing he needs to have his own Yavin be damaged. He's going to let the Shiru die, play Villain Trettenmouth perhaps on another row as well, just to enable his Taller to survive his own Scorch.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where you have to go from here. You can play the Bork, but are you going to have enough targets, realistically? I mean, what is there anything Ethne can pull? Can you choose not to pull something with Ethne, for example? Because if you can choose not to pull with Ethne, he could play the Bork in order to burn the 13, then Scorch the 12.
You gotta play... If you play the Bork on the ranged row, your Taller gets damaged below the threshold, then the Bork will go off because it can't die here. There it is. The Bork goes off.
The drought will hit the Taller twice, putting it down to below the value of both his Yavin and his
It'll probably only hit it once, because I expect the Ithne gets played next. But either way, the Villain Trettenmouth will kill both the Yavin and the Siege Tower here. And again, the muzzle is hitting nothing.
I mean, he's going to take another hit. So it depends what reinforcements pulls. Is there any way reinforcements can deal 5 damage?
Well, the Villain Trettenmouth checks... I don't... it has to be Siege Master. But we saw all 3 Siege Masters, right? Did he Naneki a Siege Master? If he Naneki a Siege Master...
No, we saw... Oh, he might have Naneki the Siege Master.
If he Naneki the Siege Master, he has it. The Villain Trettenmouth dies off the reinforcements into the Naneki'd Siege Master, which will do exactly 5, and that will kill the Villain Trettenmouth before. Because, like with the Dun Banners, of course, it triggers before whether there it is. We see the 1 Siege Master. This is going to kill the Villain Trettenmouth, and the Taller keeps going down, but it's not going to get there fast enough. It's at 9.
Yeah, and that's got to be, what, to reveal? So 6, 7, 8? So it's an 8-point difference. And
the muzzle is completely 0 points. It's going to come down to what the Ithne pulls here.
Ithne can pull Scorch.
Is that enough?
He's got Ithne Scorch, kill the 12, yeah. And he gets more points on his to reveal.
And the muzzle being completely bricked just ends the game in Rolton Shive's favor. I mean, you have to take the Ithne Scorch here in this case, I think. And that feels so bad when you have this muzzle scenario for round 3. I mean, that is just a nightmare.
I opted for the zap.
Wait.
6, 7, 8 points. No, it's still Rolton's game even with the zap because of the dead muzzle. But honestly, interesting choosing not to go for the Scorch.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that. I guess he might have been playing around another Siege Master in some way. Man, that...
Well, I think if he discarded the muzzle, he would have gotten 1 more tick of weather.
Yeah.
Which would have meant he lost by 1 point.
That is an absolutely crazy game. I have no idea what happened there. But, of course, we see Rolton Shive winning it, as, you know, of course, we predicted. So, we are going to be seeing his own Ithne deck proceeding and effectively eliminating himself, because this is Conquest. And, of course, Son of Flame is going to have to take a win off with his Hensel deck as well. God.
That was such an odd game. Like,
yeah.
Not Scorching... It plays around Scorch.
Oh, God.
On the flip side, if your opponent has literally any other card, they win.
We're about to see maybe another odd game as well. Because here we have the Henselt Mirror, but Son of Flame has the Bloody Baron as well. And Rolton Shive doesn't know about it yet.
Nope, he doesn't know that it's a Baron deck, so... I think he's in for a surprise, although maybe he suspects it. Apparently, it's a deck that Freddy's been playing, so depending on how much attention he pays to the decks of other players, then we'll have to wait and see.
Oh, God. I mean, at least the muzzle will be finding more value in this matchup, you hope. I mean, I think it really has to. The muzzle looks like it will be getting pretty good value here.
Yeah, I think this is
Unless
the
you
matchup
draw it
where
in a
the
really
muzzle
awkward
does
round
give value,
play, yeah.
and Rolton doesn't know about it because
Exactly.
Son of Flames
He
never
didn't
played
play
it. And that's the thing with I guess opting not to discard discard it and get more points from the drought, because he knew he was going to lose anyway because of the Teruvial. So actually choosing to pass there meant that he gained points. Well, not gained points, but maintained information. So
Exactly.
it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this muzzle, and also what happens with this Baron.
Yeah. And this is almost reminiscent of last game, just because both players are playing decks that make the other player's deck awkward. They're both playing around kind of the same sort of strategy, although Son of Flame was mulliganing his Scorches super aggressively in the last game. Is he able to get enough value out of this Baron in the matchup, though? I don't think so.
I think it's going to be a lot more challenging. Like, this is the thing with the Henselt mirror, is a lot of the time it comes down to who kind of starts shooting the other person first. And that's where it kind of gets a bit frustrating, because if they start killing all of your units before you can start killing all of their units, they just get the kind of snowball effect and thus get ahead. So that, for me, is kind of where it comes down to in this mirror, is who's going to start shooting who first.
Yep, that's exactly right. So we see Rolton Shive developing the reinforced trebuchet. Son of Flame has no way to try to kind of deal with its value, although it's going to take a while to actually ramp up in terms of that value here.
Yeah, at this stage, it's a little bit of cat and mouse of who chooses to start playing machines first, and also who chooses to play their Henselt first. Because if you commit your Henselt, you can just remove all of your opponent's machines, and that kind of secures you the round. But then on the flip side, they'll have the Henselt for a future round. And also, Rolton knows about Drought now, so that's not such a surprise.
Yeah. I mean, he might basically just be playing to effectively try to bait it out. Obviously, this matchup is largely just about getting the IIs out. I mean, if you can be the player to get them out in like a round 3 scenario, you will be the one with the advantage.
Yep, and with both players having Thaler in hand, both of them have kind of a choice as to when they want their IIs to come out. But on the flip side, if you try and hold them for round 3, you can end up in a situation with a brick draw.
We see the Winch offering another reinforced trebuchet. If he wants to take it here, he does. There it is coming out. The battering ram is likely just about to clean up the first reinforced trebuchet from Rolton Shive. There that is coming out as well. And both players just preserving their Thalers. You expect that at any given time, if one Thaler gets played, the other is coming out in fashion, of course, as well.
Yeah, it's a risk, right? Because you don't necessarily know that your opponent has their Thaler or not. So because you're not sure, you kind of have to decide whether you want to take that risk and try and get your done banner. But then if you make that play and they have the answer, then you kind of, that's your Thaler then committed. And typically people don't want to commit Thaler round 1. A lot of the time it's used round 2 just to secure card advantage.
Yeah. And this is, again, just kind of an awkward matchup. Obviously, Son of Flame having the disadvantage, because this is such an even matchup with the exception of Son of Flame's interesting deck choices, that the coin flip does actually end up mattering. Of course, this being one of the matchups where it is kind of most predominant in terms of its impact. And there's the Siege Master healing the reinforced trebuchet.
That's an interesting decision. He's created a little pocket, so maybe that was his goal there, rather than playing a machine that Son of Flames could potentially remove. He's creating a pocket before he plays his machine.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, this is honestly just a very bizarre matchup again. It's basically both players trying to make the best out of a worst situation from a point perspective and finding effectively like the least awkward moves to play in any given situation. I don't know. It looks like Son of Flames might have to play the Henselt here, and that's a really what?
It's just a strange situation.
But
I mean, he sets up the target there so he can remove it and kills the battering ram and then pulls the Dun Vanar.
What?
I don't know. I'm not entirely certain what is going on at this stage.
What? I'm bamboozled, Jaggerous.
I mean, maybe that's his strategy, right? Maybe he's trying to bamboozle Rolton, sorry, by playing the Henselt now.
Bolton? Dude, you really have Game of Thrones on the mind, Jaggerous.
Yeah, I do. I kind of do, but yeah, so maybe he's trying to confuse him. But then he doesn't have an answer.
Maybe he's trying to confuse us.
Like, he doesn't have an answer to Bork. And he knows that Bork exists and he's playing a Baron deck. So maybe he's trying to keep his Baron under 13 points so that he can block the Bork with Thaler. That's what I'm going to go with. Of
course, it's so simple. I don't know what this game is anymore.
Like, I guess he's in a situation where regardless of what he played, he was going to force the Dun Banner. But then maybe you pass in that situation?
I
don't
know. Okay, so Rolton is gonna take this one card down, just cleanly playing there. He's got the Henselt, he's got the Villain Treadmirth. But of course, Son of Flames has the Natalis, so we'll have to see how it goes down in round 3. It could be anyone's games. I mean, it's basically gonna be the Henselt versus the Baron here.
Yeah, it's a very, very strange situation, to be honest. And I mean, maybe he was trying to trigger the heat wave, like such that the Dumbana were on different rows and he could play the heat wave. But like, why would you play a heat wave that late into a round? This doesn't make any sense.
No, Jaggerous, it does not.
Well, welcome to Russian Gwent, everyone. I guess at this stage it remains to be seen what Son of Flames will do, whether he'll choose to play his Thala or whether he'll hold on to it and try and block during round 3. Because I think that blocking during round 3 is the smarter decision. Like, I think here...
That's alright.
I think Rolton will play his... But then, actually, Rolton's going to play his Thaler. Realistically. That's what you do in this situation. Especially when you're running Bork. Because you don't want to play it... Although I guess you could play it next round to deny...
Okay, so we see the drive pass coming up from Rolton. So,
okay.
The natural response, obviously, being the John.
Guys, what? You just played Natalis. Right, so it's not working, you guys. So we're gonna do our best to get that back online as quickly as possible. Sometimes we run into technical difficulties. So.
Okay, so we see Rolton drawing the Vandergrift. What do you think about that inclusion into his deck, Jaggerous?
Vandergrift is an interesting card. I guess with the amount of damage that you have, you can kind of guarantee 1-strength targets, which means that you can kind of guarantee the Ragnarok effect of Vandergrift, assuming Ragnarok does what I think it does. That I don't think it's a terrible inclusion in this deck. The Thalers happen, so the Dunbanner aren't getting thinned, which is, I guess, difficult. Although, if Rolton does get too far ahead, that could still happen. And we see the drought coming out now. And this drought actually is going to kill Ronvid so many times. Like, Ronvid is he's just like serial dying at this point, and that's going to rack up a lot of points onto.
I too am serial dying, Jaggerous.
Yep, onto the Baron. So it'll be interesting to see though whether Son of Flames has a counter for the Bork.
Okay, so it goes back to Rolton Shive. Obviously, he has the last play here, which is pretty important, and it's really going to come down to his strategy about how to use this Vandergrift. How late he kind of wants to delay this. I mean, you can use it pretty early here. You already have a decent line for it, and waiting too much longer is probably only going to make that worse, unless, of course, you plan on scorching the 13-point taller.
But Vandergrift's really awkward in this situation because... Oh, that is early. Vandergrift's really awkward in this situation because, I was going to say, it blocks your Bork. But he's actually opted to just play the Bork now and target the 13 and try and get that off the board. So then Vandergrift is no longer awkward on that middle row. Because at the moment, Vandergrift is really awkward because it's going to be hitting the highest unit because it triggers Ragnarok, which kind of goes against your strategy with Villain Treadmirth.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we see the Wind Shear being pulled out. He has a few options. The Trebuchet is actually interesting. He's going for the Trebuchet this could make a couple of things a bit RNG here, because of course it actually does matter what this ends up hitting. I mean, there you can see it kind of plinking out just 1 point of armor off the villain Tredemirth. Any instance where it hits Ronvid will be completely wasted in terms of value unless Ronvid is on the melee row. And it could in theory align a Scorch, although Son of Flame doesn't have one in his own hand.
Yeah, how many turns does Son of Flames have to? He's got 2 more turns with the Tredemirth, and actually killing the Ronvid there is really good because it means that it's much harder for Son of Flames to actually try and kill this Bork, and I don't think he can with ballistas in hand and no crewmen.
Yep. So here's the Siege Master coming out, and this is going to basically do the revenge on Rultan Shive. He saw Rultan Shive healing his Trebuchet in round 1. He's saying, you know what, I'm going to steal that play. I'm going to heal my own Trebuchet. And he gets rewarded with the with the Ronvid coming out on the same row, creating that pocket there.
Yeah, the positioning of the Siege Expert on the right-hand side allowed for that pocket. So, you know, if it's something where you're not entirely sure when Ronvid's going to come, place your units onto the right and hope, you know, that for the 1 in 3, because there's no RNG in Gwent.
That's exactly right, Jaggerous. Okay, so here's the Siege Master, and this is going to actually just keep the Ronvid down. He knows that in addition to keeping it down for 1 turn, which is very relevant here, of course, it seems kind of counterintuitive because it feels like you're wasting damage, but every turn you keep it down is a big deal. And of course, when it respawns, it will not generate the same pocket, although the Spattering Ram could be played to the left of the Siege Master to enable that as an option.
Yeah, we did literally just talk about that as a strategy, but clearly maybe it's not what Son of Flames was doing. What?
Wait.
Ronvid went in between. Oh, I did not know that was a thing that would happen. Son of Flames is clearly playing 4D chess while we're all playing like checkers at this point.
I can only imagine that has to be the case. So here, Rultan Shive does have a pretty good line for Vandergrift. This has to be the best Vandergrift I think he's going to get. We have the Henselt coming out, and this is going to be pulling out the double Battering Ram. We're going to very cleanly kill both the Ballista and, of course, the Reinforced Trebuchet. Looks like it's smashing... oh, no, he's declining the Ronvid as well. And obviously, Zoltan Shive is just a ton of points ahead until, of course, these II guys come out.
Yep, 29-point difference. With a 15-point Henselt and a lot of good targets for ballistas, who wins this?
It's going to be pretty close. I think these ballistas might just do it, Jaggerous. I mean, that's going to be a huge smash for value, and this Baron will be a powerful finisher because, of course, Rultan Shive has no finisher that can counter it. He has last play, but he doesn't have any Scorch effects anymore. He is not anticipating this Baron. His entire set of 3s is completely wrecked by this Ballista. It will be pretty close, though. I mean, the Vandergrift is going to get some serious value, assuming it's played pretty soon.
Yeah, I think he's not going to maximize the value from the Ragnarok effect, but because of the number of units on the board, he'll get okay value in that regard.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And here he's just kind of killing a few more units. He is
all those
out of
3s
row
are about to
space.
get shot.
Yeah, he's about to get a lot more row space there. That's absolutely correct. But he
and
has,
how many points is Baron going to get?
It's getting another 5 off of this, and it's going to be 1 more off of the dead Ronvid as well. So assuming this Battering Ram doesn't kill anymore, it's going to be a Siri Nova, or Baron Nova as he's now known.
So he's got 2 points on the Battering Ram, which I guess means he's picking 1. I was going to say if he gets 2 points, he can shoot the Siege Expert for 2.
Yeah,
he's going to be hit by the weather anyway, so he should play it in the back row and shoot the Siege Expert for 2 to get another kill, which then buffs. He's gone for the 8s and 7s. It's 1 more point.
Unfortunately, it does look like the Baron Nova is probably not going to be enough here. It will actually be pretty close, and it will be 23 because it does get buffed while it's on the board now, and that Siege Expert is dying. At the same time, though, this Naneki isn't hitting enough. The Ronvid comes out, it's going to be 24, but the Drought will not be enough, and it looks like Rultan Shive will end up taking this.
Yep, so Rultan is now 2-0 up in what is probably one of the strangest games of Gwent I've ever commentated.
The strangest set of Gwent I've had the pleasure to commentate, Jaggerous.
Yeah, and you commentated Coin Clash, so, you know, that's saying something.
I commentated Coin Clash. Okay, so what do you think about this series so far, Jaggerous?
It's been interesting. I'm gonna go with interesting. We saw a Baron deck, so that was exciting. But we also saw some strange
I
commitment.
got a little excited that game.
Yeah, I think we saw some strange commitment and strange decision making. Though ultimately, it came down to a very close game in the end.
Yeah,
The Baron,
like last one was as well.
yeah, he was bigger than Serenova. I guess he's been like,
Working out.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's actually quite a shame that Baron wasn't able to clinch that, because that was a fantastic display of an opportunity for that Baron to achieve huge value. It was almost enough for Son of Flame to take the game there, but he is playing the same deck again, so maybe he'll have that opportunity this time while he faces Rolton Shive's Greatsword Skellige deck.
I mean, are you excited? You get to see Son of Flame play that Baron deck for the third time.
Yep, that's absolutely correct, and I can't wait to see what's going to be happening this time. Okay, so we started off with Rolton Shive going first, and of course, great swords, you play the great swords out, you play the longboats out, you can tutor it off of the captain, and he's just going to be looking to set up here. This is a slow hover over the muzzle, and he's thinking about using it on Son of Flame sides. Now, Rolton Shive is very familiar with... The muzzle was played last game, right? Or was it not?
Yeah, No, I think did he mulligan it? I don't remember. Interesting. I guess he's going to wait till it's damaged and then muzzle it. That gives you more points.
Yep, that's typically what you're going to do here. You can muzzle it this turn. We'll have to see if he does that. That will be a pretty dominant muzzle. We do see the other greatsword in Rolton Shive's hand. Here's the muzzle on the greatsword. Just getting an extra point there, denying effectively the longboat's ability to damage. We'll see the other greatsword coming out from Rolton Shive's hand, but this one has a 2-turn timer. So Son of Flame will have 2 turns to be able to kill it, and it will effectively start at 7 strength as well, so you can do that with 2 battering rams pretty easily. See Coral come out first. This provides tempo with the Roach, denies the Ronvid. I really like this play, actually, because he knows if he plays Greatsword before he kills the Ronvid, it's just going to be that much easier to shut down.
You can see Son of Flame opting to taunt in Russian there to his opponent to show that he means business. And it's time for a winch. Winch will get you out of a pinch. What have we got?
Okay. I have a few decent options here. We see the Reinforced Trebuchet. This is going to come out on the ranged row. A bit of an interesting choice. It potentially will lose some value after this, and of course killing the Pirate Captain isn't necessarily something you want to do earlier as well, but it will provide the tempo. And here's the other winch, but unfortunately,
I really dislike the Trebuchet because it plays into his strategy.
Not having a crewman is really hurting here, because you'd really like to be able to kill Roach or something instead of just killing that Pirate Captain.
But with the Siege Expert, he can kill the Greatsword.
Yep, that's true as well. So he will definitely be doing that, and this is just a pretty great matchup, I think, for the Henselt player here. I mean, just being able to, especially when you're running the muzzle, being able to punish these greatswords is just going to do, honestly, a great job in terms of basically reducing the game plan of Rolton Shive.
Do you go Wild Boar of the Sea here? I was going to say, because if you play Wild Boar of the Sea, you can buff your greatsword up 1 point, and then it's not so easy to kill.
Yeah, I think the Wild Boar is... a bit tempting in that scenario. Unfortunately, the kind of like alignment of the plays isn't really great for it, since it strengthens to the left, so you'd have to kind of eat your own coral. But would have been an option nevertheless. Of course, the Henselt does maintain the ability to pull out Chain Ballistas here, and it looks like he is dropping this. He does just kind of want to get ahead here, and he has absolutely the ability to do it. He has no 4 strength units, so he doesn't need to play them with the crewman, and this is just going to keep him ahead of Rolton Shive. And of course, if you are in Son of Flame's position, if you can stay ahead every turn, you are looking at a great game.
Yeah, plus with this matchup, it's similar to what we saw previously in that with Skellige, if you can get ahead of them and then go into round 2 in control, you can deny a lot of their resurrections. So maybe this is the thought process when you commit the Henselt here, is that you want to, kill units and try and get control. The other thing is, because his finisher is Baron, he's not so reliant on Henselt as the finishing play, and killing units does set up his Baron for his final play.
Yep. So, sorry, Rolton Shive is actually going to have to stay ahead here, and this is going to be pretty tricky. I mean, he has the Burna and the Wild Boar, both of which are fantastic in the long round, but he's not really developing either. He's not really playing for the long round. He probably has to get out reasonably soon. The only problem therein that you'll be losing on even cards as soon as you do that. Now, that's just not a great position to be in. You have the Jenge for the Sigdrifa, but you haven't developed greatswords that are really giving your Freya's value, and it looks like Son of Flame is just smashing Rolton's win condition here.
Yeah, it's really tricky when you don't have any priestesses, because when removal completely counters your strategy, you need to get those greatswords back on the board, and Shive doesn't have that option. He wants to hold the Sig for the Jenga, and you can see there the pass coming out. 2 cards down by Rolton.
Yeah, and that is just, it's an unfortunate position to be in. Luckily for Rolton, the Ronvid isn't coming out. If the Ronvid was coming out, what you would often see is like first play Udalric into taller counter, and then the 14 points, the extra point from the Ronvid does block out Rolton even more. So he does have a bit of a saving grace in that Rolton is banished here effectively from the artifact compression. But at the end of the day, ooh. And there's Drake as well. That's going to go a bit of a ways in terms of helping a win condition, but I don't know if I see it. There's not enough turns for this wild board to really salvage things, and the Sigdrifa Jenge will probably be met with a pretty swift end, as Son of Flame quite easily has the last play here.
Plus, when you get too far ahead, you know that the Dun Banner are coming out, so you have to be really careful in this kind of situation, especially when you're 2 cards down. How you kind of play out the round, whether you choose to pass, whether you choose to Udalric here, like what do you choose to do?
Yeah, there's not really a correct answer here. I mean, when you're greatswords, you do kind of want to bleed, but being 3 cards down in this case kind of reduces your desire to do that in the first place, right? It puts you in a bit of a no-win situation.
True. I mean, the thing is, Rolton can choose to play into this round because he has Udalric, so he can kind of choose when he wants to end the round. But by playing into this round, he's making the final round shorter, and by making the final round shorter, he puts himself in a bit of a precarious position in terms of how he wants to play out his, because a lot of his point generation is from longer rounds. So he's opted to play this as the longer round and then use the res as the shorter round and try and make a better res target.
All of his strength is tied up with Jenge. His win condition is basically Son of Flame not drawing into the Scorcher, the Villain Treadmirth, I think, at this point. And the Taller showed him neither. Son of Flame might actually not be drawing them, which would be a big deal for Rolton Shive. I mean, even though he is 1 card down, smashing that big Jenge in round 3, something like a decoy on a medic as well, could actually be a bit of a win condition if there's no Scorch effect from Son of Flame.
True, I do love that Taller placement though between the 2 boats, because Taller is not a card that you ever want to resurrect as you do play it on your opponent's side. So by forcing the buff onto the Thaler instead of the boat, he is kind of denying Rolton's win condition.
Yeah, he's basically playing for round 3 a little bit more. He could have put it on the right side and then it gets a bit more damaged, but he knows that points don't matter too much in this round. As long as he stays within 1 card of beating at any given time, he's still going 1 card up. And just taking away points from Rolton's round 3 is just kind of what you want to do here.
True, though Son of Flame does need to be careful that obviously he can still catch up with 1 card, because that's, I guess, part of the strategy in this situation. Part of the strategy, for Rolton with control of the round is maybe to try and get enough tempo that he can afford to pass and either force out Baron or force Son of Flames to play 2 cards and, even things up.
Yep. So there's the Siege Master just threatening the Greatsword into effectively a kill state again. Of course, even if something is placed between the Wild Boar and the Great Master to effectively try to, make it so Son of Flame has to deal 5 damage, we're still going to see that 5 damage with another Siege Master here.
So do you decoy the Greatsword? You know that it's going to get killed and you don't really want that. So
at the same time, though, it's never going to go off if you decoy it, right? Because it gives it boosted strength. So it's kind of, Son of Flame will just kind of deny the opportunity to even hit it at that point, and you're not really getting into much better position. I think you need to save the decoy for round 3 for an additional res, even though it does mean your great swords are never really going to find use. Pretty dicey situation all around.
He's just committed Sigurdrifa to this round, which I guess says just that he's just going all in on this round. I mean, if the Greatsword does die, on the plus side, you can decoy one of your reses and resurrect it, but committed to the Sigurdrifa and pulled the
Rolton is
Darvanos.
absolutely banking on this Sigdrifa being decoyed. If Son of Flame effectively sees that line, and this would be an impressive call, but if he kills the Sigdrifa, he denies an absolute ton of value from Rolton Shiva because the decoy is
But realistically, he can kill both, right? Because he can kill the Greatsword and then he's got an extra shot. And I think when you have that extra shot, you go for the Sig over the Priestess, and he wants to kill things because that's his deck strategy.
And there it goes. Yep. So this decoy is looking very bad. And on top of all that, does Roltan have the pass? He does, because he's getting a free, what is this, 4 points effectively? He does have the pass, but of course, Son of Flame will go one card up, and Roltan has kind of expended his win condition. So at this point in time, it looks like Son of Flame probably has this. I don't see a draw that bails Roltan out of this situation.
Yeah, Rolton is grasping at straws at this stage, and I mean, Son of Flame finally is showing why Baron Nova is a deck to be reckoned with in at least this matchup, being able to remove all of his potential point generators. You see the decoy going out on the Freya there, but we're not actually going to see this. We're not going to see this Greatsword buff unless Rolton goes all in with his Corsair. But then surely he's using the Corsair for the boat.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think there's enough. There's not enough of a way. I mean, when you're in Rolton's position, you basically have to play very risky and hope that somehow Son of Flame has such a bricked hand that you're not going to be able to win. I mean, he could be sitting on something like a Villain Tretmarth, which is a 10-point card in a round 2 situation like this where your opponent has total control. But even then, I mean, you're just not getting quite enough value. There's the Greatsword potentially being healed again, and this will force out some decent value from Son of Flame, because Rolton does have the Greatsword. This is going to 13. The Wild Boar is generating effectively 2 points, as is the in addition to the Longships being 1 each as well. So I mean, you're seeing some good value there, right?
So I think Son of Flame has to commit Baron if he wants to catch up in one play.
I believe
which
that's
means
right.
He'd still have card advantage going into the final round, but he then doesn't have Baron Nova for his final card play. But I think committing Baron here is better than playing 2 cards.
I mean, it's only 17 points at this time. I don't know if it would be like a Baron Nova, maybe more like a Baron Dash. But yeah, I mean, he could commit the Baron Dash here. Looks like there's a minor disconnect snafu. Ooh, and we're seeing some Discord messages. I hope nothing was sensitive there. Okay, and a Skype conversation. And
if only we had a caster screen we could throw to.
Well, I mean, I guess I could do that. I was just kind of, I was kind of playing off them, but hello. So it looks like there was a bit of a disconnect snafu there, which is a bit of an issue. Now, typically in these situations, we're gonna, they will be talking to the players, kind of sorting it out. In a scenario where a player has a situation where it was kind of clear that a win would transpire, obviously there's some arguments to be made, but typically, since you can see both hands particularly, an agreement would probably be made where I think the win would be given to Son of Flame there, because it was a pretty decided win at that point.
Yeah, I think ultimately Son of Flame had it. It kind of came down a little bit to draws in the final round, in terms of whether he drew something completely bricked. But it's unlikely, he's got Scorches and stuff, so he would have been able to just kill whatever it is that the Corsair pulled. And realistically, I would say that Son of Flame had that game.
Yeah.
So I would be surprised if they called otherwise, although... Oh, we're back!
We're back! Wait, hang on. Oh, we're back! Okay, so actually, it wasn't a disconnect after all. We just got bamboozled.
Yeah, we got bamboozled. I'm assuming you switched the screen so that we can see, but it looks like what happened is Son of Flame played his Baron round 2, then passed, and then got scorched.
Wow, yep. And that'll do it, although actually it did come down pretty close. This Greatsword is growing just a little bit, and it ended up being a difference of 3. Huh. Okay, so we're going to game 4. Help.
Yeah, we're going into game 4 now, so we do have a set. Finally, Son of Flame managing to win with his Baron deck, but he does still have to beat Greatswords twice with his 2 remaining decks. I believe one is Francesca, and one is Crack and Crate, so we'll get to see Son of Flame's Crack or his Francesca going forward. What remains to be seen, though hopefully we'll get into this match fairly quickly, and there isn't too much of a delay as as we wait to see what's happened.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Jaggerous. So we have we'll be getting into the game theory, and as you put it, it's basically going to come down to this Greatswords decks, because of course when you have a conquest format, both players need to claim the win with all three, and it's going to be up to Roltan Shivi's Greatswords deck to be able to win either of these next two games, and it's going to be up to Son of Flames decks to be able to punish that Greatswords twice. Now Greatswords is an inherently very counterable deck. It's very possible that with the lineup that Son of Flame has, he might actually be able to secure these two wins. Normally, you're kind of fighting very uphill in this case.
I think it depends what he goes for, because Francesca with Elf Swarm doesn't have a lot of removal. So it's kind of just a case of, spaffing out points and seeing who can out-tempo the other one and force it into a situation of a 2-card difference, because it's going to be different. Although I say Elves don't have much removal, we're sitting on 2 Panthers here. Although Panthers only dealing 7 damage, so not quite enough to kill a Greatsword unless it's already been shot.
Yeah, but typically, I mean, you have to shoot it itself, right? And I think this is a matchup where, again, the Francesca feels very favored. I mean, obviously, it could go either way, but we might actually be going to round 5 for the Greatsword Mirror after this. So it could be another 5-game series.
And lots of removal in Son of Flame's hand. He's got the Yorvith, which does deal 8 damage. He has the Panthers, which deals 7.
Which is enough to kill them with the long shit ticking once.
Yeah, although if the row gets 2 stacked, then that's not longer an option. And actually opting to throw 1 Panther there instead of holding onto it for the removal. Although with Crack, you do get a 10-point Greatsword, which is not killable.
Yep, it's outside of both Yorvith and Panther range, of course, unless the ship hits it twice.
You could, however, go for the Archer here and just deal damage to it. It hasn't been hit yet. So you could opt to deal a little bit of damage now so that you can kill it on the next turn.
Yeah, potentially. It's actually a bit tricky to play this out. I mean, if he doesn't play anything and the Longship comes down, he's going to need to deal 9 in 1 turn, which he can't do. I think you're right. I think you do have to take the Archer here.
Yeah, and I think the safer strategy is to take the 3 damage onto the Greatsword. The riskiest strategy is you do 3 damage on Crack. And then hope that they damage the Greatsword on the next round. But why would they damage it necessarily if they can just let it heal? That's kind of guessing whether your opponent is going to be a rookie or not. Whereas in this situation, it's now in Panther range and it's now in Yorvith range. And I think for me, I would opt to play the Panther. Panther
may not be an option. If we see Captain into Boat, which is a play that is predictive of Panther, if he's predicting Panther, I mean, it did just get hit down to 7. You Captain into Boat, and you've got 4 units.
But who predicts Panther?
That's true. I don't know. Some people play Panther.
Oh, the Roach! 4 units! Roach is the MVP going for a party on that front row, which means that you have to commit Yorvith in this situation.
Is not happy about that. Not only do you have to commit Yorvith, but your Panther is disabled later. Like, it's not... You're not going to be able to Panther it again. It just lives now because of that Roach. That's a huge deal. And we see Son of Flames Roach not returning the favor.
And typically, there's no reason for Roltan not to row stack in this situation when you already have that boat set up. Interestingly, the points are going on to the leader.
Maybe he's got a Kahir.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, we have the Shiru in Son of Flame's hand. He will show off that he is indeed the Son of Flame, and potentially try making these Greatswords a lot more awkward. The problem is, of course, that's a decent part of your win condition, and saving it later might be better if you can secure last play in the game. But that Roach and just like denying that Panther opportunity is going to go a big deal in terms of making this game very awkward for Son of Flame.
Yeah, I think Son of Flame is in a bit of a tricky spot. He's got the Shiru, but that's only a 1-use card, and typically you want to save that, for the final play where they resurrect a big target. You don't necessarily want to commit that into the first round.
Yep, that's absolutely right. So we're going to see what he does here. He is, it looks like, hoping that he will get the Shiru alignment for the 8s. And if you get that, you take it. If Roltan does not play a Warboat here or anything that will disalign, but of course, the Warboat gets played and the Shiru on the 8s gets avoided. And Son of Flame is equally displeased about that, because that was, banking on squishing those 2 8s was, I think, his out here in terms of securing some real potential this round.
Yeah, it's a misplay you see a lot of people make is when they line up 2 big units, like a boat and a greatsword, for example, and then your opponent has a Scorch or a Shiru or an Igni or something that just makes your day kind of that little bit worse. And Roltan predicting that and choosing choosing to avoid it. Although Son of Flame's starting to get a lot of elves out. We see Aileron is coming out now as he's accumulated 5 elves on the board. Well, actually 6, because the half-elf hunter made 2, but you only need 5.
Yeah. So we'll have to see how this plays out, but again, I mean, this is looking really awkward for that Son of Flame. I mean, just that single roach and like the fact that this Shrew wasn't really enabled are kind of ruining his conditions to be able to take over this round. And if you can't control round 1 against Greatswords, you are in for a nasty realization in round 3, especially with the Jenge being another round 3 win condition as well.
Yeah, I mean, Son of Flames does have a big tempo play with the mulligan into the Rehead in order to buff all of his elves, so that is a fairly strong play, and it may give him some choice. He drew a half-elf hunter, though, which is maybe not what you want to see in that matchup.
Yep. So it's up to Roltan Shive how he wants to play this out. He does need to play a bit for tempo here. One of his warboats is not going off, but it looks like he does have enough of something like Jenge because, of course, his greatswords are healing and his other ships are going off as well. It shouldn't be too hard to stay ahead of this.
Yeah, the alternative, I guess, is he could commit another greatsword, but if he does that, is he going to have enough points? I mean, the one on the right will heal, and he's got the 2 boats, the Wild Boar of the Sea and the 2 light longships, so...
I believe greatsword would be enough, although it would be close. I think it's 1 point over. But there's the Jenge as well. And of course, that will take it by quite a bit here without aligning any sort of Scorch. I mean, the Scorch potential is there on this 15-point longboat. But again, I mean, you can't really afford to burn Scorch in round 1.
True, and I like the choice to shoot the boat, because if you have the boat on an odd number of points, we're always going to see the greatsword buff up to an even number of points. So that means that they'll never line up.
Yep, that's exactly right. And it's just, if you're Son of Flame, you have to be feeling the awkwardness of this situation. I mean, you just don't have the win condition that you really needed. I mean, with a hand like this, you can't really push around. You have no Vanguards, you have no Saskia. I mean, you can play Isengrim, and he could pull out something pretty good. I mean, you could go for a Milena Steel. He's got the Teruville and the Milena, so he is running the, like, kind of full Bamboozle style variants. We'll have to see exactly what he does here, but it looks like he's not going to have enough to combat Roltan Shive's round 3 plan.
No, he's in a really awkward spot, and his remaining cards just aren't great. You know, you have the Sapper, but Sapper takes 2 turns to flip. You have 12 points on an elf, but that's just 12 points. And you have a dead Panther, and then Shiryu that you don't want to play this round.
Yeah, and you have Francesca. Francesca will probably be pulling Syria Nova, because of course this variant does run the Nova, but it's going to not do enough in terms of combating Roltan Shive's round 3 plan. I mean, when these greatswords just start going off, there's not a lot you could do. I think Son of Flame may have just had to take an earlier pass, but even in that case, it might just not have been enough to secure control over the game, because when greatswords don't get controlled, they control.
I think this is the best point to take a pass, because at this stage you do get 2-card advantage.
Yep.
Which gives him a little bit of breathing room and maybe the option to counteract the massive reses that, you know, Roltan is going to see going forward with the Jenga and the greatswords and the boats.
There is a possibility a hero pass comes out on Roltan's side, though. I mean, going 2 cards down is huge. It looks like he's declining the opportunity. Going 2 cards down is, of course, absolutely massive and something you don't want to have to do. And this is a deck that is very well known at this point for running Sappers and Milena and other cards that aren't to reveal. But
I don't think you'd ever make a hero pass there, realistically. Like, he played a spy from Isengrim, and there's no way he'd play Milena and then pass. I like, in what universe would that be the play?
Yeah, that's true as well. I mean, it's basically a play that's saying that you feel so uncertain about your round 3 scenario that you feel like it's your best chance. But of course, as we know, even going 2 cards down, he does have a pretty solid round 3 state. Although I completely agree with you that Son of Flame did find a way to actually potentially dig himself out of this hole. I mean, that's a fantastic opportunity in terms of just getting that value.
Yeah, and you can see him making a 17-point play here, and that's not going to flip. So that is super duper awkward, depending on what Roltan chooses, because obviously he's in the driving seat. He does have Udalric, and realistically, I think you want to play Udalric this round if you're that far behind. Like, if you're at 2-card disadvantage, I don't know why you wouldn't play Udalric this round. So I guess his strategy here is to maybe just try and push Son of Flames. I'm not entirely sure why Roltan's playing into this round.
Yep. It's something you typically might do as great swords. I mean, it depends on what he's expecting Son of Flame's hands to be, I would say. I mean, you have the opportunity to play for something like Udalric as well, which I think we'll see. Yeah, looks like he wants to play this a little deeper. I think one of the things in Roltan Shive's hand, though, that's going to be very awkward is Coral. In fact, that may even be super duper awkward.
I'm inclined to agree. I guess what you have to do in this round, though, is thin. That seems to be what his strategy is just thin his deck and try and find his Resurrects, because if you look at the state of his hand at the moment, it's not great. And everything he's played so far with the Pirate Captains and the decoy under the Pirate Captain, it seems like the goal or the aim of the game is to kind of try and thin his deck and maybe generate enough tempo that you can try and regain this advantage against your opponent, because typically with Elf Swarm, their first few plays are low tempo.
Yep, that's exactly right. So, I mean, it's going to be too hard for Son of Flame, I think, to make this up. He needs to find some way to have some kind of alignment on the Scorch. That's really his only chance, but I don't really see a way he can do here. There's the mulligan on the Vanguard, and he can try to pull something that has a chance at aligning. These greatswords with the boats going off, there's Hattori. Do you see an alignment here? A greatsword is going...
No, not really. He's got an 18-point Scorch. I think... The thing is, Roltan's hand is really awkward, because, like...
Yeah. Roltan is committed to this round by playing this way.
I was going to say, what do you play here? And I think he's just pushing tempo. I don't think he's going to commit the Udalric. I think at this stage, his strategy is just get so many points ahead and get that engine going, such that Son of Flames has to commit, lots of cards to catch him up.
Yep. And here it looks like the Hattori is coming out. You can res some options. Since it's a 6, you can res the Officer into the Vanguard, or you can go for it to reveal, although to reveal just being 14 points is not necessarily amazing. I mean, it's less good than Officer into Vanguard.
Yeah, you gotta, the thing is, Roltan is banking on drawing a res. And admittedly, he's played only one Priestess, so he's got, I'd imagine, Sig and 2 Priestesses left in his deck. And also, probably, actually, he's got a Corsair in there as well to resurrect a boat. So he's got options because he did buff up one of the boats. I think this is where Roltan passes, but if he does pass, can Son of Flames not catch up with Nova?
A Nova catch-up is an option. Additionally, with the Panther hitting the 20-point boat, both boats will go to 15 and then to 17, and you can Scorch that. If the pass comes out here by Roltan, you can win with a Panther on the 20-point boat and then a double Scorch Chiru. Or you can also just win with Chiru, like a normal person.
Yeah, I think at this stage, it's not enough of a point gap for Roltan, but I think Roltan has to maybe roll that dice if he wants to win this game. Because if he plays, I mean, alternatively he plays Udalric and takes a res for the next round.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually pretty interesting. What do you think about Roltan's decision to play this round out?
I think I get what he was trying to do. Like, he was just trying to play enough tempo that he could out-tempo Son of Flames, but didn't know, what was in Son of Flames' hand. I think you had to play Udalric there, and I think you had to take the res because Muzzle isn't going to give you anything guaranteed in the next round, whereas you do have a big boat. On the flip side, though, you're down a card and going... I mean, he's going second, so I guess that kind of evens it out, but on the flip side, your opponent has Chiru and Nova.
Yeah, and that's a really big deal. I mean, Roltan Shive does have... 7 points here? Does he have the pass? He's got the pass, right? It should be 7 points.
If he passes...
Oh, because the great sword
the ships will both trigger.
But the great sword won't.
But the great sword won't, so he doesn't have the pass.
There's just kind of no way for Roltan Shive to get him out of this scenario at this point.
Unless he plays Corsair to push the Chiru, but if he does that, he's relying on a res and it's never going to out-tempo a Nova.
Yeah, I mean, it just looks like this match really got turned around, and even though Son of Flame had an awkward round 1, it looks like he will be taking this, and we will go to the second 5-round game in a row. I mean, there's no hand state, there's no double draw, I think, that Roltan Shive could do that can really salvage this. He has some good reses, and it's true that Son of Flame's hand can absolutely be awkward, because you have to play the Shiryu before the Nova, and that can lend some really awkward options, since of course you have to play first if you're Son of Flame. There's a War Dancer, ooh, but
I don't think it's a big of an issue.
Matter.
I think Shiryu might be a little bit awkward in his hand, depending on what happens here. Although, looking at that hand, I think what do you take? Do you take Svan Rigger and try and trade out your Corsair, or do you just go for points?
I mean, I guess you have to take the Svan Rigger here. It's probably your best option. He's fishing for something. Looks like he found the Burna. He must have been fishing for the last card in his deck then, but it's never going to be
I'd
enough,
imagine it's a Sig.
Yes.
And that's all she wrote. There's no way he's getting 22 points.
If he had found the Sig there, would it have made a difference? I mean, you do have the big Jenge, right? But it's never
he has a Jenge and he had a big-ish greatsword, but I don't think in either of the cases it's enough to overcome the number of points that Son of Flames has.
Man, so the game goes to Son of Flame after all. We go into game 5, and this is going to be the Great Sword Mirror. Crack on crate on both ends, assuming, of course, that Son of Flame is bringing great swords, which is relatively telegraphed by the Crack, although some people play Crack a little bit differently. Man, what do you think about this series so far?
I mean, Son of Flames had such a shaky start with that Baron deck, but do you think we're going to see the reverse sweep? Like, it seems to be that he's started to find his footing, and I think that now Chevet's on the back foot, and that's kind of difficult. Like, coming off of 2 losses does really get to you in terms of mind games, and I think people underestimate how much your frame of mind can affect your ability to play. You know, people go on
absolutely. People always, you know, they say, "Oh God, I would never make a misplay in that situation," because of course it's very easy to, you know, just kind of sit there and really, you'll feel like, you know, have that kind of hindsight and have that like perspective and not really have pressure or anything on the line. But the tilt can really get to you, and you'll find that I think with any good tournament, the skill of one of the high any good player, especially in something like card games, needs to be completely immune to tilt and like being able to recover when you make these misplays. Anyway, we get into the final game here. It is not exactly a Great Swords Mirror, because as we see, Son of Flame is bringing a more standard style Res Cursed deck with Crack instead.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out whose Crack is better as we go into this final game of the set. How do you feel about a Cursed Crack versus a Greatsword Crack?
I mean, I like Crack. Like, I think it's definitely something that's a little bit underrated. It's kind of hard to beat out the Bran, but at the same time, when you are playing in a tournament environment and you don't necessarily need to be able to play for that carryover, the Crack can absolutely give you just huge value. Just make you have a much better time in terms of like being able to shut out your opponents. I mean, we saw some Crack decks in Gwent Challenger, for example.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I like Crack too, and you know, he does synergize really nicely with this deck in terms of finding Jenga, and also for finding Olgierd. If you happen to draw your Jenga, you can find those, you know, the Morkvarga and the Olgierd, and put a few extra points on them, which makes your carryover game a little bit stronger, which is something you really have to take into account in this sort of matchup.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, Crack can basically just it can deliver whatever you want in this scenario. Here's the Greatsword, and there's not going to be an answer in Son of Flame's hand in terms of shutting that down. I mean, in reality, when you have a Greatsword in the driver's seat of the game, taking the coin flip, and without Son of Flame having an answer to it, I feel like the Greatsword deck may just have the advantage here. And if anything, we see the muzzle coming out from Rolton Chevet's hand. I'm not necessarily sure it will be able to find value outside of course, the Bran matchup, but it's not necessarily, it's never going to be bad here.
I agree. I think in this situation, it's a little bit awkward because both of them have good long rounds, but the thing is, Greatsword long rounds carry over to the next round, whereas that doesn't really happen with Son of Flames. Their carryover is their Morkvargs and their Olgiers and that sort of thing. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens here, especially with Son of Flames not really having anything that interacts with Rolton's cards, because if you don't have any ways of kind of stopping these chains, like what do you do?
Yeah, and if anything, the kind of downfall of Rolton Shive, potentially the saving grace of Son of Flames, is that we don't see a Wild Boar in Rolton Shive's hand, which is a big deal in this sort of kind of early round development. You really get a huge amount of value after getting that out. If we don't see a great line for Muzzle, it is actually possible Son of Flame could, I think, overcome the odds here and potentially take this.
Yeah, but you can see very standard plays by both players. Son of Flames, developing a cursed board, playing out those bears, and you can see Rolton playing out his great swords and getting his boats online and thinning his deck. These are both kind of very standard situations. Although Rolton does have that muzzle in hand. How do you feel about this?
It's something that gains you huge value in the Bran matchup, but of course, because Son of Flame is running Crack instead, you're not able to steal something like a Morkvarg, you're not able to deny that Ceres by doing something like that. As we can see, there's not really a target here for it. At the same time, he did play the last two games without showing this muzzle, right?
Yeah, I don't think we saw the muzzle in either of the last two games. I mean, typically, I guess it's run in this sort of situation to counter a muzzle.
Exactly.
So in this matchup, though, it's very hard to find value out of muzzle because there's not a lot of targets that are going to be 8 strength. Like, you maybe get Skell sometimes, which is worth 5, so that gives you an option. But you've either got a lot of 1s and a lot of like 11s. So there's not generally a great target for muzzle. So we're gonna have to wait and see as to how this affects Rolton and his strategy.
Yeah, I don't know. It looks like Rolton is really just completely in the driver's seat of this game. I mean, he has the engines that are giving him huge value over time, the ship plus the greatsword setup, no disruption from Son of Flame, no real round 3 game plan that can smash those reses, and even with some awkwardness in Rolton Shive's hand, namely, I guess in this case, the muzzle or potentially the recons, if those, don't get too much value or anything like that, even with any minor awkwardnesses, Rolton Shive is definitely in control here.
Yeah, and as time goes on, he's just racking up more and more points for future rounds. And this is such an awkward situation for Son of Flames because he can't really do anything about it. If he passes, Rolton will just, he'll just deploy the same strategy over and over again. And he can maybe try and push this round, but this is the first round, so it's not even a situation for Son of Flames where he can try and, use tempo in order to draw cards out of Rolton because he's going first, he lost the coin flip, and because his strategy relies on having cursed units and having damaged units, which means that if Rolton happens to pass, those Berserkers become a lot less valuable going forward.
Yeah, and that Roach provides a neat bit of tempo as well. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but 4 free points coming out like that does a huge amount in terms of just forcing the opponent to be unable to catch up. And this is a game of speed right now. If Son of Flame cannot catch up, he is losing on even no matter what.
It's a really tricky one to decide, when do you pass and when do you play and how do you get ahead? Because I feel like Son of Flames, he maybe feels he has to win this round. And then, I don't know, force out some reses in the next round and hope that Rolton doesn't draw them going into round 3? Is that how you win in this matchup?
It could very well be. I mean, that has to be, I think, your best hope. At the end of the day, I mean, Greatswords is the kind of deck. It's actually very reminiscent of Consume Neckers, if anything. It tends to just win kind of proactive versus proactive matchups. It's counterable by a lot of things, but those things aren't really present in the meta right now, and they're definitely not present in Son of Flame's deck. So when you have that kind of situation, and in this case, he's forcing Son of Flame 2 cards down as well.
Yeah, that's very, very difficult. 2 cards down versus this deck with that kind of size on the greatswords with no removal. I mean, if you have Scorchers, for example, then you're having a good time. But he doesn't have Scorchers. This isn't that crazy 8 Scorch deck that we saw earlier. Well, that was a bit of an exaggeration, but it's very, very awkward for Son of Flames to play here. And with that hand, what do you do? Do you dry pass? I think you have to dry pass because otherwise Rolton can just res and catch you up. There's no situation where you're going to get tempo on him. But then if you don't dry pass, he's just going to get that tempo on the next round.
Exactly. I mean, you literally have to dry pass, like you said, but it just feels very bad. You are 1 card down. Here's a pretty easy muzzle on a Morkvarg, I think. Do you just take this? I mean, it denies a cursed. It puts a little bit of value into next round, and it's pretty unreliable compared to the rest. He's going to take the muzzle, and it looks like Rodon has a bit of an unstoppable round 3. Now, this Aguera True Form can find Scorch, and it can even find Hailstorm as well. There's a bit of a trick with Hailstorming against Greatswords where you need to, if you're playing Greatswords, if you play them on the even number of turns remaining, they are effectively immune to Hailstorm because they'll heal right before the end of the game. But it's probably not going to matter at the same time. I mean, the Aguera is Son of Flame's best chance here.
Yeah, I almost feel like Son of Flames has to just high roll. And it's a bit, just looking at Rolton's hand, it's super awkward. He's got Sig, he's got Priestess, he's got 2 recon, so he can kind of more or less find whatever he needs in order to just set up some more boats. The question, I guess, is whether he decides to go greedy and set up the boats now, or whether he decides to hold the res till later, where they are less likely to get removed. But ultimately, I think in this matchup, you just play the boats, because they don't really have a lot of removal. And when you have 2 recons in hand, you can more or less find all of the reses that you do need. And you'd rather just start generating those points.
That's absolutely right as well. Here's the Greatsword coming out, countered by the kind of longboats in this case. Of course, both players have longboats. We're going to see the Wild Boar giving some value here. I mean, if there's no alignment for like a Scorch value or something crazy like that, can Son of Flame even win this game? I mean, a single Scorch probably doesn't swing this enough.
I don't think so. Given his hand, I mean, yes, he has Nova, and Nova's a big play, but beyond that, he's got a Berserker, but not a whole lot of targets to actually make it that big of a play. Whereas you're looking at Rolton with a Sigadrifer, he's got more big greatswords in his graveyard. He's got Burner, so he can kind of start to chip away at those units on the middle row as well if he chooses to. It's a very difficult situation, and all the while, that greatsword on the front row is getting stronger, that Morkvarg is getting stronger, and there's plenty of turns left in the game.
Yep. I mean, the Siri Nova is going to be a lot of points, but when you compare it to just like the extra value you gain over time with, I mean, the Recon's pulling reses into Greatswords, we're not seeing the Burna being played here. It looks like he's saving it for a better setup, although it's going to be hard to get a better scenario than that. But I guess he doesn't want to end up damaging Son of Flame's units for the Berserkers.
I mean, realistically, Son of Flames is likely to play more units on that row because there's a boat. So the option is to delay 1 turn and wait till he plays a target on that row, which we'll probably see here, because I'd imagine he wants that guy to get hit. There you go. And setting up the burner to get that extra point per turn. So you wait 1 turn, but then you get an extra, 4 points? So I think ultimately it works out. You lose 3 to gain 4. It's like min-maxing, I guess.
Okay, we see the Aguera being dropped, and this is not going to show amazing options, unfortunately. The Necromancy will banish a 14-pointer and give him the boost for that if he wants it. It's probably the best option. You can clean up the Jenge, but even in this case, it's not giving incredible value. He has to banish the opponent's Jenge and pull his own. One of the better grabs for him, but unfortunately, I don't feel like it will be enough. It looks like Roltan Shive still has this.
No, it's a very exciting pull, but ultimately there's 2 14s in Rolton's graveyard. So by banning the Jenga, you haven't really achieved a whole lot. Like, yes, Jenga gets stronger because you can damage things, but it's maybe like 2 points, 3, 4 points, whereas he's still got a big 14-point res, so I don't think it's quite enough. Although, definitely an interesting card to include in your deck. Or actually, didn't include it. He got it off Aguera, didn't he?
Yeah, it was off of Aguera. So it looks like there's not going to be enough points here coming out from Son of Flame. We have the Recon and the Sigdrifa. There's no way Son of Flame can take this, right?
I don't think so. He's got 8 points from the weather, right? So long as Sig and Recon equate to more than 20, well, not even 22, like 16 or so, then he's not got it. That great sword isn't going to buff, but the one on the right is. You've got 2 boats. You've got the Wild Boar of the Sea. Yeah, 9 points is not enough with a 14-point res.
Yep.
Actually, I think if he'd passed, he still would have won.
Yeah.
Could have gone for I think he possibly could have gone for the BM pass there with 4 points of damage from the weather plus the
boats going off. Yep, that's exactly right.
The boats going off. So
missing out on
didn't
a
even
huge
need that.
BM opportunity. But we see Roltan Shive advancing here, which means the finals is, of course, going to be Angstrom versus Roltan Shive. And we saw Angstrom pulling maybe kind of a more conventional strategy, playing his own Hansel deck, and he was playing... Rolton Chive was the one who had kind of the Eithne Scorch deck as well in this series, so it'll be interesting to see how that matches up against Angstrom. And of course, Angstrom was committed to banning Brewer. Would you ban an Eithne?
I'm not sure. The Eithne deck is very interesting. It has a lot of Scorching, and you are running Harold, so that kind of very Scorch-heavy deck is it's gonna work against your Harold deck. I'm trying to think which other decks it's gonna. He's got the Hensel, does he not? That was kind of intermediate.
Yep.
I don't know.
Both players did have Henselt as well.
I mean, is it how much of a problem is it against Alchemy? Alchemy, you do have those Ails, so you are buffing up units, so multiple Scorches could be an issue. I guess it depends on how you feel your decks stack up against a deck is that Scorch heavy as to whether you opt to ban the Eithne or not.
Yeah, no, I don't think he would, but at the very least, we should probably see his Axeman deck getting played, unless, of course, it gets banned again, which is a bit of an interesting ban. Basically, a tell that you really just don't have a way to deal with it. But, of course, I mean, with the lineup that Rolton Chive has, you're definitely going to be looking to ban something other than Axeman, because we have very removal-heavy and Scorch-heavy general lineup in all things around.
Yeah, I think Rolton, he does have some very removal-heavy decks, so he's maybe not as bothered by an Axeman deck as the previous players were. But ultimately, I don't know, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. This is the point where you have information, especially in a live tournament like that.
Yep.
Assuming they're paying attention. Like, you've seen everything that happened.
Yep.
So this is where you have a lot more kind of choice in what you want to ban and what you want to play against. And this will kind of tell how confident your opponent, the players feel about their decks and what they kind of feel it'll excel at. And this is where a lot of the times this is, I think, where games can be won and games can be lost, is how smart your players are when it comes to the bans. Because if you ban badly, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage.
Exactly. I mean, it's a really huge aspect of tournament play that kind of gets almost swept by the wayside, but it can absolutely very, very, very easily make a difference just in that kind of like one. I mean, it's a single decision, right? But it is probably the most important single decision of the entire tournament, because, when you compare it to any given play, it has a higher likelihood of having like a real impact.
Yep, and especially in this situation where you know the decks, you have so much more information that you have to be really careful in what you pick. And also, we've seen situations where players go into tournaments targeting specific decks, and that's worked very well for them. I know Freddie, I think, went into a tournament targeting Spies and ultimately came out on top, and Super JJ targeted Consume. So if you have an idea of what it is that your opponent's going to play, you can kind of tech your decks against a certain deck, and then so long as they bring that deck, it doesn't really matter what you ban, so long as you don't ban the one that you've teched against.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who do you think is favored out of these players? Obviously, I mean, I don't know if you saw Angstrom play in the last tournament, but he had very, very clean plays, kind of by the books, but doing it very well. And on the other hand of things, Rolton Chive, I think he brings like slightly less conventional things, like the Eithne deck, for example, is definitely less conventional. But, I mean, if you pull it off well enough, it can absolutely pay off.
I think I always like to see less conventional plays because I think it throws players. Yeah. Like, a lot of the time when we watch tournaments, you'll see that the less conventional decks actually do better, unless you're Tailbot and you can play conventional decks with that level of precision. Because that's what Tailbot does the best, is he'll go into a tournament with your more conventional decks, but he plays them so well.
And Angstrom is a little reminiscent of that.
Yeah, make mistakes. And that is exactly what I would say, is that Angstrom, he's kind of the Tailbot in this situation, whereas I would say that Rolton is more creative in his decks, but with how precise Angstrom has been, I'm wanting to say that I think Angstrom will go 2 for 2.
I'm thinking so as well. I mean, at the end of the day, you were saying like these kind of creative decks can win you games in tournaments, and they do that by providing surprise value. But as you were also saying, at this point of the game, the players know what the other players are bringing. This is going to give them more information for stuff like bans, playing around certain things. Rolton Chive had Muzzle, and I believe 2 of his decks, if that's right. And that just allows Angstrom like the opportunity to kind of play around these surprise factors, whereas the disadvantage Angstrom has by bringing maybe more conventional decks is, if anything, reduced.
Yeah, I think what I would love to see is I'd love to see Angstrom play his Axeman deck, his Harold deck, because how players pilot Harold decks is like, Harold is, I think, a very challenging deck to pilot because you have to decide when you're going to play your Axeman, what row you're going to play your Axeman, when you're going to play your Weather, and there's a lot of kind of different things to weigh up in terms of timing. A lot of it is very timing dependent because if you play, your Axeman too early, they'll just play everything else on a different row. But if you play your Axeman too late, you're not going to gain enough points from the amount of damage that you can deal. So I think it's one of those decks that's very tough to pilot, especially depending on the matchup. And
yeah,
I think if we see that match, it'll kind of tell us more or less where Angstrom is on this level. And I think he's a player that's worth keeping an eye on because
he really impressed
really
me
solidly
in the last tournament, the one I casted with Panda just like last month, the January one. He really impressed me, just like no mistakes basically.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll kind of see how that plays out. I think on the flip side with Rolton, Son of Flames, I think made some mistakes early on, and I think Rolton really was able to capitalize on that.
Yes.
And I think we did see Angstrom, I would say, go against a more challenging opponent. So ultimately, I think the fact that it went to 5 games in the Son of Flames Rolton matchup maybe reflects worse on Rolton, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I mean, here's the bracket up here for another chance. And we should be getting into this game momentarily. It's good when you have a final series for these tournaments to give the players just a short breather, like a minute or two, which is kind of what's happening right now, for no other reason than, of course, I mean, it's a bit of a disadvantage because Rolton Shiva has just spent the last hour playing and Angstrom has had more of a break. So you want to even it out, give a little bit of a break because that mental fatigue, when you try to maintain that level of focus for that long and like you're kind of scribbling everything down, can really get to you. So they're giving the players just a minute or two of a break to make it a little more fair. And then we'll get into this next game here, which is Angstrom versus Rolton Shiva.
Yeah, I mean, on the flip side, you could say that some people like to get warmed up, and Rolton is going to be more comfortable with his decks because he's just played them all compared to Angstrom. But I do agree, I think mental fatigue is really a thing in Gwent because, especially in tournaments when you're concentrating so much and you're roping every single turn, it can be quite exhausting as a player. And I think ultimately that's why we see in Gwent Open, for example, they often have a show match, and the show match is great because it gives those players a break. It lets them get a snack, get a drink, go to the bathroom, think about the matchups, and it gives them time to kind of study. Whereas Angstrom has basically been studying Rolton and Son of Flames decks for the last 5 games. So he's had that kind of advantage in that he's kind of been able to sit down and study them. Admittedly, Rolton was able to watch the first set, so they will have been able to study their opponent then, but it's maybe not as fresh because there's been a break. But actually, we're going straight into a matchup here, and we have Angstrom's Dagon versus Rolton's Arrakis Queen that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, we have not had a chance to see this yet.
And Angstrom opting to ban Ithne, whereas Rolton opted to ban the Calvé, so the Alchemy deck.
Oh, and we see the Mandrake and the Morvud in Angstrom's hand, so this may not actually be too bad of a matchup. And we have the Caretaker as well. A lot of people don't consider Caretaker a tech against the Consume matchup, but being able to deny, for example, the first Necker Warrior that gets placed down is a big deal, because if you can deny the Slides Edge from coming out, you are well on your way towards a victory against Consume.
I think this is going to be really kind of close, but I think it's really interesting to see Rolton's choice of ban. Banning Calvé I really like, because Calvé is good against Greatsword, Calvé is good against Hensel because he denies your Hensel targets, and Calvé is good against Consume because he kills everything. Yeah. So I think the Yan ban there is a solid choice.
But the first Mandrake coming down against the Necker that can't be kept down is actually going to hurt Angstrom a little bit. When you just have one Mandrake, unless of course you're playing for like Ithne and to shut them out, when you just have one Mandrake, it's very risky using it on the first Necker like that, because if they have another Necker anyway, you've wasted a Mandrake that would have gotten a lot more value in a round 3 scenario.
That's true, but he does also have Morvud in hand, so he could opt for that lock. Although at that point, you're not denying
warriors,
you're not denying
that's what it's all about.
Duplication, which, like you said, this is all what it's all about. I mean, he does have Caretaker, so like you said, he can fish out of the graveyard and try and deny some of the Slizzard value. This is going to be a really interesting matchup, and I think a lot of it's going to come down to the skill of the individual players.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if anything, I think the Mandrake was a kind of noticeably weak play coming out of Angstrom. Like I said, the player has like some major strength in terms of his consistency and not making misplays in just playing like strong options in conventional decks. But I think the Mandrake there, using that too early, may come back to bite him.
See, I kind of disagree. I think if you play the Mandrake there, you completely shut down their strategy if they don't have another Necker, and a lot of players will mulligan. Like did I guess maybe he would know that there was a Mandrake in the deck and hold two, but a lot of players you're like he's basically what you're saying is he's relying on finding two Neckers. But what is the likelihood of having two Neckers versus having one Necker? And we've seen Consume matchups where they have no Neckers. You know, we've seen Shaggy, for example, end up in a really horrible situation with Consume where he just couldn't draw Neckers. And I think if Anstrom was able to push Rolton into a situation like that, which the Mandrake would do if he'd only had one Necker, that would basically put the game into Anstrom's hand, very, very easily. So I think it was a worthwhile risk, is what I would say, because if it had paid off, it would more or less guarantee him the game.
Okay, so we see Rolton Shive just develop more Necker Warriors chugging along, as of course he does. Now he's losing value over time, and it's going to be impossible for him to win round one without going 2 cards down. But of course, you're Consume. You're very happy about the opportunity to go 2 cards down if it means winning round one after having developed your Necker strategy. I think the one thing that's kind of noteworthy here is that if Angstrom does win round one, he has the first play Caretaker to try to deny a Slizard, and that could potentially be game winning here.
Yeah, it really depends how many Neckers Rolton goes through with this first round. Because ideally for Angstrom, he wants Rolton to only lose 1 Necker, then he can Caretaker it and deny a Slizzard, which means that it puts Rolton in a really awkward position with draws. But on the flip side, people really want to win round one against monsters. Like winning round one is, a lot of people say you have to win round one against monsters. That's just what you have to do. And those kind of are contradicting, because if he wants only 1 Necker, then he has to pass early. But if he wants a long round, he'll pass late.
Ooh, and there's the Ozreal right away, banishing that Necker Warrior from the graveyard. The Slizard is no longer able to pull out the last one, and that's definitely going to do a good amount of harm to Rolton Shive, not being able to develop the 3rd Necker Warrior so early, and being 27 points down with 2 Weathers ticking against him. He may have to get out pretty soon, because Angstrom has a pretty solid pass, potentially forcing Rolton 3 cards down otherwise.
Yeah, this is actually a really strong position for Anstrom with the ability to pass. We see the decoy come out, which is really low tempo. Admittedly, it's going to get eaten, and that is an extra duplicate, which means that Rolton will have 2 more Neckers. But honestly, I think at this stage, he's so far behind that having those extra Neckers isn't that useful. 3 Necker Warriors is kind of enough.
Yeah, and here is 3 cards down Rolton Shive, but he does have extra Neckers in deck. Man, you hate to... Is this 4 cards down? The Vran is still ticking. You can't see it because it's hidden behind that face-down trap card. Is this going to be enough to take this?
I think it will, because he's going to pull a Necker, then eat another Necker.
Yes.
Because the Vran should eat that 10 strength Necker. But it's still...
actually surprisingly close.
It is very, very, very close. That's
3
a lot
cards down.
Of cards.
Yeah, you hate to see that.
And he played his Arrakis Queen, which means he doesn't have that option for later on.
Yep, it's going to come down to draws here a little bit. Now, Rolton does, of course, have a very scary deck in Consume, and we don't see any plays in Angstrom's hand that can actually constitute carryover. So we should see a dry pass coming out here from Rolton immediately, taking it to round 3. There it is, 2 cards down, but with completely unrestrained Neckers. The Morvud might be enough on Angstrom's hand to shut out Rolton's ability to pull out all the Neckers he needs to.
Yeah, the thing is, with this situation, they're both going into a long round, and admittedly, Consume loves a long round, but so does Fog, and so does Moonlight. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. And I think that Caretaker may be key in this strategy. Yep. You see the Phoenix coming out into the hand of Rolton, and it's going to be interesting to see how Caretaker is used to maybe try and deny the Slizzards or the Phoenix.
Yeah, I gotta say, I actually think that Rolton would be in a pretty defensible position going into round 3 if he was able to draw Burress Ritual, and if Angstrom didn't have the Morvud in hand. Going 3 cards down as Consume is something you can do, but I don't think it's going to be enough here. We're going to see a Necker coming out on the Slizard, but the Morvud should immediately come to just stop that as an option, and there's just not going to be enough on Rolton Shive's end to make use out of the 4 Necker Warriors he played earlier.
Yeah, Morvud is basically just going to put the brakes on that train, and I don't believe Rolton has any option to find more Neckers, does he? Because he's got the he's got the Phoenix, which only resurrects Draconids. He's got Algol that eats, and he's got Folktails that eat. Like,
I think
there's no
there's one more Slyzard in the graveyard, I believe. At the same time, though, it's never going to be enough.
So he has to take the Slyzard now.
Yeah, Slyzard into Necker. But your Forktail, because you only have one Necker on the board, your Forktails are only pulling one Necker at a time, and that's a lot of points, but I don't think it's ever going to be quite enough, unfortunately. I mean, we have the muzzle on the 8-string Siren, but Angstrom has alternative ways of getting used to that Moonlight, i.e. Werewolf. And of course, we'll have Ozrel buffing the Neckers before additional ones are pulled, but more Neckers being pulled out are actually going to be at a lower strength threshold. This one's at 13, but the future ones being pulled out are going to be 9s and 10s.
Yeah, it's likely to be very small. I think we'll probably see... I was going to say a Dagon fairly soon, although opting for Caretaker. He doesn't know whether Rolton has any more Slizzards and whatnot, so he's... I think he'll. I was gonna say. I think he'll take the Vran just to deny that option, not knowing that Rolton doesn't have any more consumes. Though I expect we'll see the Dagon and the Fog come out fairly soon after this.
Yep. And Angstrom getting denied a free 2 points off of that muzzle there. Werewolf being played earlier would have gotten those 2 points, but it's pretty unlikely for those 2 points to end up making a difference here. And Roltan has some good value here. He will use Ozrel, and he will still pull out 2 additional Neckers with these Forktails. He's actually looking at a pretty powerhouse finisher. Is he going to be able to win despite being denied like that? 2 cards up, and Angstrom is still not developing anything on the Moonlight.
But is Angstrom... Well, at that stage, is a toss-up. You can either play the Werewolf or you can play the Fog. They equate to the same thing.
Yes.
I imagine we'll see the Werewolf, or does he have Slizzard into a Alpha Werewolf in the graveyard? I'm not entirely sure what his Slizzard's going to be pulling, but realistically we're going to see him play his engines here. And although there are some big eats coming out, I don't think it's realistically going to be enough. It depends how big this Necker is.
It shouldn't be. The Wispess Tribute in this case will, of course, represent the Monster's Nest in Angstrom's deck, which is not going to be an insane amount of value, but it will be... Man, this is actually going to be a really close game, right?
Yeah, I'm wondering what's on the GLs in terms of options.
I think Roltan might have enough points here.
It's tough because there are 3 turns of weather.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is already 12 points, which means that Rolton's only up 12 at the moment. He's got 1 Necker cycle, and that will also buff because he'll eat something else as well. So it gets a single buff. I don't think it's enough. I think Angstrom probably has the edge, unless that Slizzard doesn't have a target, but I'm assuming it does.
Yeah, it's got 1 target. It's the Werewolf in this case. And
yeah,
it's gonna come down to what the Gales is gonna pull. I mean, the Wisp Essence to the Monster's Nest is likely pulling Ghoul, I assume. I think it's gonna be close, but it does look like Angstrom has it here. It's gonna depend on the Gales. Here's the Forktail pulling out the last Necker from Rolton, and this is gonna establish the rest of his points for this round. The score to beat is 93.
Yeah, so he's got 31 with 2 turns of weather, I believe. So yeah. That's another 8. So he's got 23, right? I think 23. He can make 23.
He should be able to make 23. 2 gold cards. I mean, he can almost make that in 1 gold card.
Yeah, especially when he's got the kind of choice with the Monster's Nest of what he wants to go for, whether he wants to go for Ghoul, what he's going to eat, and kind of how he chooses to play that out. I think it's pretty close. And he's kind of deciding what it is that he wants to take, whether he wants to take a Drowner, whether he wants to go for the Ghoul and take the Consume.
Yeah, it looks like Angstrom will be taking this out, but just kind of scraping it through barely, even after forcing out Roltan 3 cards down in round 1 and playing both Mandrake and Fiend, still barely beating it out. Roltan, I think if he had better draws, something like a Brew-esque Ritual.
He's gone Frightener and drawn Siren. I guess did he not have any more golds, and then that was the only silver?
Oh no! Roltan takes it. No,
Blood Moon! Holy smokes! What a finish! We did not see that one coming.
Yeah, nice save there with the smokes. Man, that is absolutely crazy. The Blood Moon finisher on the row stacking being able to swing it back in his favor after finding the Frightener off that Gales. Man, that is completely ridiculous.
What and you saw the taunt coming out there towards the end, like Orson was kind of thinking about sending a wee taunt when he saw that when he saw the Frightener. Admittedly, the Frightener extended the game, which gave him more points with the weather,
Yes.
and the Blood Moon play there, such a nice play there in order to finish off that game in such a close play. I mean, because he needed what 5 points from Gales,
Yeah.
so we were like, oh, he's got it in the bag. But you know, when you've got a Frightener and maybe no other option.
No other option. But I mean, we'll have to get into our next game here. Which wait, that's not right. The Consume player won, and he's not playing Consume anymore. And we're back to us. Hello, hi.
Yeah, that seems a bit weird.
Someone must have did a little oopsie on the clicking screen for the deck selection. Anyway, I assume it'll be getting into the next one as soon as they rematch and select the right leaders there. But of course, Roll10 having taken... What happened there?
I'm pretty sure Rolton lost, right?
Yeah, Roll10 lost
by 2 points. Yeah, and
so why did it reset then?
I don't know if Rolton hadn't played, into one row, he would have won.
Yeah. No, he would have. That round 3 was a pretty strange thing on both ends. I mean, we'll head back to the bracket at this stage, and of course, Jaggerous and I, since we don't speak Russian, we're completely in the blind in terms of what actually happened or what is causing the delay here. We can only speculate.
No, but I think it's worth commending RuGwent. Like, I think considering this is all being done live, the production has been pretty solid. And this is the thing with Gwent is, especially without spectator, you're always kind of relying on the internet quality of your players. And it turns out that players don't have good internet quality. Like, I don't understand why everyone in this day and age has bad internet, but that seems to just be the way it is. Wait. Although, this does look correct now. We have a win for Dagon.
Yeah, there we go. So it must have, must have bugged out the interface, or player chose the wrong deck. Because, of course, there's a different deck being chosen here. It looks like Enstrom accidentally picked the Calvite, even though it was banned. And now he's back on track with his Axeman deck. So this is going to be Axeman versus Consume. This is a matchup that Consume will pretty often win, I think. It should be pretty readily in favor here, especially without any special counters coming out from Engstrom.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a fun one to see. Although he does have those harpooners, which does allow him to disrupt the Brand Warriors. And it'll be interesting to see the effect that has. You can see the choice to commit to Berna. Why did he play? I guess he assumed it would get moved anyway. I was going to say, why did he play the... And people always play into Weather, but why would you play into Skellige Storm?
There's no reason to play into it here, honestly. But it shouldn't often matter. I think this is probably one of the more one-sided matchups here. It's going to depend on the text a little bit, and Roll10 is running a thicker deck, so he could potentially get some awkward draws. But if you can get these Necker Warriors developed, which is happening already, you're in a great position to carry away with this game. It can really depend, though, and it looks like he's still playing into the Skellige Storm as well.
Yeah, I really don't understand the decision to play into the Skellige. There we go. He's decided not to do it because by playing into the Skellige Storm, you're playing into his Axeman strategy, and that's the kind of thing that will cost you the game is if you play into the Axeman strategy. So I guess he's people are used to being like, oh, I got to play into Weather. Fog and Frost, you play into it to avoid drowners.
Exactly.
But in this matchup, you don't play into the Weather, boys. Like you're playing into your opponent's strategy, and that's not what you want to do.
Yeah. And there's the Whale Harpooner in the reverse, pulling Vran out again, back to the Seadra, but on the wrong side this time. There's the Forktail playing into that Weather yet again, developing another Vran target in this case. And it's gonna be up to, I think, Engstrom how long this round goes out. He can probably win it, but you're probably committing too many tools to win this round at this point.
I don't know. I think you want to commit to winning this round, and then go for a kind of a mid-length first round, a mid-length second round. What's interesting is I was going to say him hovering the Axeman there when you have Darren and you have Restore, because typically Darren, he's a great res target, so playing him now is fine. And alternatively, he's also got the Heimei Battle Maiden, so he could instead thin an Axeman rather than playing one from hand. Yes. And I always like the choice to thin rather than play from hand, because you're not guaranteed to have one on the board when you want to play the Heimei.
Exactly. And we'll just see more row stacking coming out here. A little bit punishable by something like Lacerate, but he's making a call that Angstrom does not have Lacerate, and he's right in this case. We're going to see this Ren continuing eating. And Roltan does have a hand that makes it kind of hard to push round 1 very far. Something like a Brewess Ritual can give you value if you committed this round, and enough Neckers are dead that you could do that as an option. We'll have to see how it works out.
I mean, he's committed 3 engines at this point. You're up 22, and he's getting... what, like 4 plus 9? He's getting 13 points per turn. So it's going to be hard, I think, for Roltan to keep up, even eating Neckers, and you don't want to eat too many Neckers.
Yep. I think without the Mandrake option in Roltan's deck, it actually might be pretty hard to kind of threaten being able to beat this round, especially after playing into Skellige Storm a little bit. It actually might be Angstrom taking away this game. He looks much more in control of the situation than Roltan here.
Yeah, I think at this stage when you've got that many engines on the board, and the fact that each one is gaining 3 points per turn, you're in a really strong position. So at this stage, it's going to be very tough, I think, for Angstrom, and still choosing to play into the row. I'm just like, at this stage, he can take targets out of the, he can take targets out of the weather.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, opting not to do that would seem a bit silly.
It can make sense to do it in the case of something like Harpooner, but of course, it looks like he's realizing with Queen, since it can't be dragged anyway, there's not too much of a reason to play outside of that row. Now, Angstrom has the pass, but of course, you would never do it here, because you really like having control of the game, unless, of course, the choice can eventually be made to sacrifice, to take the pass instead of committing Herald. Anything short of Herald, though, you will just keep pushing the round.
Yeah, and opting to take the Skellige Storm there over the Harpooner, which I like. He's got the Darren Res, and Roltan, again, they typically tend to stack the row, so having an extra weather is going to give you more points than maybe having a Harpooner.
Yep. Here's the Forktail coming in on the Slazar. This is just going to push the round even more. Without committing the Brewess, there's going to be kind of a limit to how hard you can do this round, though. At best, you are looking to force out the Herald, and I guess that's what he's doing. I mean, Angstrom should always be able to win this round with forcing out Herald if he wants. But at the same time, without Herald, you can have a bit of a nasty time in round 3 against Consume, especially with the Brewess not being committed.
So the awkward thing here is, I would say, Angstrom's hand. He's got Skellige Storm, Heimei. He can win with Herald, but you don't really want to do that, because if you're going to have a short round, you need you need an Axeman and Herald, and
Herald
that's how you
is
win.
Really your win condition. Yes.
So this is pretty awkward. I mean, maybe you could go for the Skellige Storm on the front row, and then if you Heimei another Axeman, is that enough points? I don't think it is, because that Necker's going to get eaten.
Yeah, the Necker's going to get another Necker either way. It looks like it's a Skellige Storm here, but if the pass comes out from Roltan, doesn't the Herald have to burn anyway? I mean, there's a lot of points per turn coming out on both sides.
I mean, he's getting, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, plus 5. This is fun. 12, plus.
I'm just gonna let you handle this.
He's getting 16 points per turn.
Yeah.
At the moment.
But the Herald has to come out here, right? That's the only option that actually breaks this. And if you try to play 2 cards, the Vran eats the Necker again. The Herald has no option but to come out. I really like that pass from Roltan, basically forcing the Herald out. And once the Herald's gone, it doesn't actually matter that much that the Axeman player was able to win round 1 like that, even on even cards. I don't know. Who do you think ends up with an advantage in this situation?
It's hard to say. Like, either Angstrom, does he even have anything in the graveyard, though? Like, for his reses? Because I don't think the Heimei is enough, so I think you do have to play Herald. I tried to work out if you could Heimei and Axeman and put it on the middle row, if that would be enough, but it doesn't look like it is.
Oh, is he playing for 2?
You put that on the middle row.
He puts it on the middle row. All the storms tick. He's done some extensive math, and it's going to be close. It flips back to his side, and he has to play a second card here. Yeah, the Necker's coming out.
What does he have in the graveyard?
Uh-oh. This is not looking good. Is this going to be enough?
What is in the graveyard? That's what I don't understand. He's playing Restore. I don't know what's in his graveyard. Like, I didn't think Roltan had killed anything.
Yeah, I don't think so either. This is a really awkward situation. It looks like Angstrom, just from his movements, he looks like he may have miscalculated.
Yeah, because the graveyard is 2 Skellige Storms. One from Berna and one that he played earlier. So he messed up. He messed up.
She applies it, right? She doesn't...
Oh, she doesn't play it. Oh, so maybe there is something in the graveyard. But what? I have absolutely no idea.
It's the restore.
Oh, the rope. Oh, harpooner from Udalric!
From
Of course,
Udalric,
he's got
right.
a harpooner in the graveyard. Is this going to be enough?
Yeah, no, I mean, it should be enough.
Yeah, that's
And
definitely
it
enough.
forces out an additional Necker, unlike the Herald play. But at the same time, going one card down to win it against Consume's huge round 3 win condition will be pretty good. And the Brewess is intact, which means even if somehow Angstrom runs Coral, which you can't really afford to do in Axeman typically, unless of course you're predicting Consume or something like that, you're not really going to be able to shut out his strategy enough. Do you think Herald will be enough to win round 3 against these supersized Neckers?
I don't think so. It's going to be very, very, very difficult. Take a dry pass here, or do you try and push cards out? I think you have to pass, right?
Yeah,
because
you have to
you
pass.
don't have a big finisher where you can try and draw out their Neckers now and then do the big finisher at the end of the round.
I mean, he simply has no hand to play this out at all. Like, there's just nothing proactive you can do while staying ahead of Neckers, I think.
So what do you think, Baba Ghazi here, just for the 6 points of carryover?
Yeah, that's probably typically the play. You could go for the Consume trigger off of something like Ghoul, I guess, or that would mostly just be cheeky. And then at the start of turn 3, you'll probably see the Ozrel coming out. This can eat something like, for example, the Darren to deny it proactively before it gets rezzed, because Rolten does have the first play in round 3, but it's probably not even going to be necessary here. I mean, when you have these Neckers developed, and with a hand like you have as Rolten, you should just be in a winning seat.
The Freya pull is really nice. If I were him, I'd throw the Drought. Like, I don't know. He threw the Gremist in the end, but Gremist gives you actually gives you Rain, I think, now, which is really good, and it gives you Blood Curdling Roar, which is also a decent number of points, and he's opted for the boat, which is actually not bad because it's going to hit 4 times, and each of those times is going to buff his two Axemen by 4. But the thing is there going to be enough points on the row? I think there probably is. I was just going to say, make sure there's enough value for Harold and for the Axeman.
Yeah,
that's what you have to kind of work out.
Rows pretty decently. At the same time, the Herald is never really going to be denied, because these Neckers are absolutely going down, and they're going to spawn their big friends, and that will always enable like maximum Herald value.
Yeah, because they will die to the weather. So I guess at this stage you just res an Axeman and put it on the back row.
You have to be resing 2 Axemans. 2 Axemans with this worship going off and with this Herald is going to be a good amount of points. I mean, each Axeman will get to roughly 20 points. Well, actually, with this longbow going off, it'll be closer to 25. But that's what these Neckers are effectively getting as well. Do you think Angstrom has a chance to win this?
I think it's going to be very difficult, and especially opting to kill. Why would you cycle a Necker?
It sounds like you're getting a little bit far away, Jaggerous. It's a little hard to hear you.
I was saying, why would you cycle a Necker?
Yeah, I mean, you don't really have to. You're losing value on Axemans by doing that. And you're gaining a little bit of value by denying a Consume trigger, but the Axemans being played first is always going to be more consistent in this way.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I think this is Rolton's game, right?
It has to be. I think it has to be.
It's just kind of, they're going through the motions at this stage. And this does sometimes happen with Gwent, is you end up in a situation where that's just kind of how it happens. And I mean, maybe you'd kill a Necker if you thought there's none left, but I can't imagine there is, given the number of Necker warriors that got played.
Yep. That's exactly right. So, I mean, Angstrom has the 2 reses on the 2 Axemen, and he's got Herald as a finisher, but Rolten he's not out of options, he's not out of Neckers, and he will just continue slamming this value on the board in a way that Angstrom can't really match.
Yeah, it's kind of upsetting. You got to watch it, but I still don't understand why he played the warship before he played the Axemen.
Yeah, it's a little strange. I don't really see a reason for it, but at the same time, it's never really going to make a difference here. I mean, Consume versus Axeman, even without the Mandrake, which is very powerful in this matchup, it just feels like it's too hard for Axeman to be able to outpower them. because Consume is a deck that just runs away with it unless it gets very, very specifically countered.
Yeah, it's a really awkward situation to be in for for Harold, basically. And this matchup was always going to be tough for him, and I think he just kind of accepted it going in.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes the score 1-1. Roltan winning with his Consume deck, and Angstrom getting out with, I believe it was his Dagon deck as well. So both players' Monsters decks are proceeding. They are effectively eliminated because this is a conquest format, and both players need to take 2 more wins. Roltan's Eithne did get banned out initially, so Roltan has to win with Henselt and his Skellige deck, and Angstrom has to win since his Calvite deck got banned out with his other 2 decks. Do you recall what they were? One of them was Henselt's. The other was
Roltan's deck?
No, Angstrom's Skellige deck.
Angstrom's Skellige deck is Harold.
Oh yeah, not his Skellige deck. His he had Henselt's.
He had Henselt. He had Jan. He had the Dagon deck that we just saw, and he didn't have Scoia'tael, which means he had Skellige.
He had Henselt.
No, he had Skellige.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah,
Henselt,
yeah,
Jan.
Of course. Yeah. Okay.
Dagon.
Yeah. Of course.
And Harold. Yeah. That's
4. Yeah. No, that's all.
Yeah,
of
we're
them.
good. We're good.
We're good. No, we're totally good. Okay, so it's both players remaining. They need to win with their Skellige and their Northern Realms decks. Now, both players have very similar Northern Realms decks, both of which different variations on Henselt. We're going to see Roltan Shiva's Henselt now against Angstrom's same Axeman. Who do you think is favored in this matchup, Jaggerous?
This matchup's a little bit awkward because of the villain Tressenmirth. It means that Angstrom has to be really careful with how he plays his Derrens and how he plays his Axeman. You don't want to line them up. And the thing is, Roltan can try and line them up because of his hand.
Yep.
So it's going to be... I think Roltan is favored just because he can line up those Axemen and he can kind of set up for the big burn. So ultimately, I think it's going to be quite tricky for him, for Angstrom to play into this matchup. But on the flip side, Henselt is it's a tough one to navigate, and he did win the coin flip, though.
Yep, that's absolutely right. I mean, it really comes down to how round 1 gets played out. I mean, Angstrom needs to force out Roltan pretty early, and that might be a little bit hard to do. Here's the Ragnarok right off the board, and of course, if you're Roltan, you have not really an option to pass, because you're never really going to want to force them out. 2 cards and a Weather just for giving them a long round. You've got to play deeper here, so we see the Ronvid. We're going to be stacking the Seadro here out of habit, and it's just going to be, the first few turns are going to be development, trying to get an Axeman to stick. Do you think Roltan has a line to kill it with Rams?
It's got, what, 9 strength? I think it's going to be very tricky to do.
Yeah, and it'll be at 10 if you try to sink 2 points into it. And
because each turn it's getting
range. Exactly.
Right. I think ultimately getting the Ragnarok out early is good because Roltan's going to row stack anyway. So it's not really worthwhile waiting for him to not row stack. You can just not row stack for him with your Harpooners.
Yep, that's exactly right. And there's the Harpooners doing what Harpooners do best, of course, disaligning the units and keeping ahead of him with Ragnarok. Basically, this round is effectively going to be Roltan giving up the round ultimately, but trying to play deep enough to ensure that round 3 is short. Really, Angstrom will always be winning this round, but Roltan's objective is to play it out long enough to hurt Angstrom's strategy for the round 3.
Yeah, that's exactly how you play into Axeman, and I'm sure that Roltan knows that in this case he's just trying to bleed enough cards out of him that he then can't have a second long round, because that's what Axeman is you give them the first round, then they are in control and they can choose when the next long round is, and that's exactly what they want. So it's a bit of a tricky one in that regard as to when you pass and how you play.
Exactly. There's the battering ram coming out. Just playing for a little bit of value. I don't think Roltan will be able to play this one too much deeper. Angstrom is going to be, slapping down some value over time. Something like this Vandergrift is not going to be seeing too much value. I think the biggest question is, does Roltan commit this taller? And if so, does he do it soon? Because it's not really going to give you value later, since Axemen don't ever bleed round 2.
It's an interesting choice. Thaler with the Dunbanar are a nice play, but it's not going to not going to work in this situation because it's only 17 points, so he's not going to be far enough ahead, even with the weather ticks, because weather ticks after the dumb banner. So maybe you do want to just commit it now and kind of get it out of the way, because in some ways the dumb banner are actually a curse, especially when you've got cold weather on the board.
I think the issue is tempo, though. I mean, if you play the taller out now, you're very, very vulnerable to a pass, because Engstrom is getting many points per turn, and Taller doesn't summon the light cavalries immediately. In addition, even with the cavalries coming out, if even one of them comes onto the melee row, it's really reducing your value, because you're empowering their Darran, and you're not really able to play for reach.
Yeah, I think realistically, Rolton has to control this round,
what do you think about this Hensel play?
I mean, that's his way of controlling the round, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Just to get enough tempo that he can then afford to pass, because I don't think that, well, unless he commits Harold, can Engstrom get 24 points in one play?
I mean, I actually really like this Hensel play. He has the opportunity to pass and force Axeman 2 cards down, which of course you don't really want to do. You want to extend this a little longer. You probably drop the taller. Ooh, we see the pass come out from Roltan. He's going to take the 2-card lead against Henselt. And that's a big deal, obviously. It means he's going to round 3 1 card up. Do you think the villain Trettenmirth will be enough in that scenario? It's going to be a pretty long round 3.
I think you have to pass there, though, against Axeman, because he's got Skellige Storm and he's got Ragnarok, so the number of points that he's earning per turn is starting to get ridiculous, and Rolter's not going to be able to get tempo, and he's not going to, I don't think he'd ever get another opportunity to pass for 2 cards, so I think you have to decide if that's what you want, and I think in this situation it is.
Are you vulnerable to a pass if you taller? I mean, he's going to have a hard time getting use out of this taller instead of using it there. If you're able to play taller and have Engstrom not pass, and Engstrom wouldn't be ahead by too many points in that case, although of course it might be a bit of a bluff given Roltan's hand.
There's no way you could, because he was getting 10 points per turn. Yeah. Like, you play taller, like, you've given him 23 points in one turn. Like, at that stage, it puts Engstrom in the position of passing, right?
Yeah. Probably, unless of course you're threatened about something like a Scorch.
I don't think, was Rolton running Scorch in this deck? I don't think that he was. Oh no, there he was.
No, Rolton was running Scorch.
So I guess that is the kind of the thing, but he didn't have Scorch, right? So in that case, if Rolton had played Thaler and then Engstrom had passed, like, Rolton would be in such a sticky position.
If you're Rolton, do you just discard Thaler here? I mean, if you did want to, you could win this round by discarding Taller.
I mean, why discard it when you can mulligan it?
It's
next round.
It's probably a wash either way, but basically it preserves your mulligan. The problem is you haven't pulled your light banners out, right? Which means
like the
and mulligan feature is maybe taking effect here. Oops. Bit of a snafu. We should be back in a moment. But the mulligan feature is effectively taking effect there, since he did kick one between the rounds as well. So if you find the light cavalry, you are going to have to kick it as well, and that will really hurt your ability to get rid of the taller and to get real value out of it, unless of course you align an Axeman with it and take an early Scorch.
Yeah, but on the flip side, if Engstrom ends up with Bildoric, then doesn't Engstrom get last play?
Yeah, that's potentially true as well.
So I guess it depends how much you value last play.
Last play in this matchup is never really going to matter, because Villain Trettenmirth Scorches, and if for Engstrom to really be able to get value out of last play, I mean, all last play is being able to, like, res an Axeman after the Scorch, which you would never save for last play as Engstrom anyway. Your last play is Herald, and then the Scorch kills one of the Axemans that the Herald would have buffed anyway.
I think, ultimately, looking at the hands Rolton has, like, he's got Villain Trettenmirth and he's got Scorch.
Yep, it should be enough.
If Harold can kill Villain Trettenmirth, then potentially Rolton's in an okay position.
Yep. And here's the done banners. These are coming out nicely, not developing that third row. Although, of course, Engstrom doesn't have the gold weather, so it's fine either way. Here's the winch coming out. Rolton Cheve just playing for a bit of value. He's going to do a little row stacking here, and he's going to get that Darran nice and cleanly down to 2. And, of course, the Siege Master here threatens 6 damage. So even with the Skellige Storm being played out, is this going to be enough? We have Ronvid losing the crewman tag, which means the Siege Master won't be enough to kill the Darran here immediately.
Master's only worth 4.
Yep.
In terms of damage, obviously it's worth more than 4 in terms of total points.
Man, this Darran is actually surviving off of that.
Yeah, but realistically, for how long? And also, Angstrom has to be really careful in how he does the damage, that they don't end up with 213s.
Yep, that's right as well. So this battering ram is going to hit the Sigdrifa into the Darran. This Darran is gaining 2 more points unless Ronvid comes to the ranged row again. Ronvid develops on the siege, which is where you want him. So this Darran is right within kill range. Now this Harpooner is going to mess that up though. That's going to deal an additional 1 damage, and this Darran is back to 6 where he belongs. Man, this Darran just does not want to die. Unfortunately though, of course, he will eventually to this Scorch effect.
Yeah, and it's actually a little bit awkward for Rolton because he's been trying to kill the Darran using his machines rather than letting it get big. It means that it's going to take a little bit of time for it to get bigger. So then maybe his machines would have been better off, damaging the Harpooner in order to get it to kill range, where you could get the extra shots from the battering rams, for example.
Yep. Yeah, that's absolutely right as well. I mean, if you're Angstrom here, you have to be looking to develop your Axemans on your next turn, but we'll have to see what Roltan does here. The Vandergrift is going to be pretty awkward, but the double Scorches should make it a nigh unlosable game, I think. In addition to, of course, having 2 cards to play here.
The problem with playing your Axeman is, realistically, you want to play your Axeman in the middle row. And if you play your Axeman in the middle row, then they have the same amount of strength as your Darran.
Exactly.
Currently, because that's the only thing that you're targeting. And realistically, are you going to shoot anything that's not in the middle row? I guess, like, if you were going to use Harold on the back row, then you should play your Axeman on the back row, and then there'll be different points. So I guess that's what you would do, simply because there's only, like 11 points worth of strength on the middle row.
Yep.
Well, actually, it's gone for the middle row.
And there it is. Like you said, they are completely aligned. I think if you're Angstrom, you realize in this case your win condition is Roltan somehow not having Scorch effects, which you do expect, but at the same time, you can't really play around it, because if you have the Scorch effects as Roltan, you're probably going to be winning this game anyway. So Angstrom playing towards his outs, but unfortunately we know Roltan has the Scorches in the hand, and I don't see a way Angstrom can come back from this, do you?
So I guess at this point you want to get an Axeman on the back row, right? Because you're not going to get full Harold value, and I think Harold is worth more. It's worth a lot more points on your Axeman than the Skellige Storm is, but he's still continuing to stack that middle row. Yep. Although actually he can pull a Harpooner, right? He can pull a Harpooner with the Heimei.
Yes, he can.
So he'll Harpooner something onto the middle row and Harold it, and then we'll see kind of how this turns out. I think it's still the Villain Tretamirth and the double Scorch is too much.
Yeah, I mean it has to be too much by a pretty wide margin as well.
Although it's no longer a double Scorch, because
they
disalign them.
I mean the Herald, all the value the Herald is getting just effectively gets eliminated. Man, it could actually be very close though. I mean the disalignment on that Scorch is a really big deal. And there will still be 1 surviving Axeman after these Scorches. The Ballista will be realigning them. If that is not the case, does Angstrom take it? I think the Ballista realignment is just going to be too much, because it will deal that 2 damage exactly that is necessary, of course, for everything to line up perfectly, and for these Scorches to just take away the game.
Yeah, so the other thing is that the Harold is not going to actually get full points of value. And I think that Ballista is ultimately, I don't know if that's going to cinch the game or not. I think all, like the Scorch and the Villain Tretamirth is maybe enough to overcome it anyway. Yeah, I think it definitely is, given the point differential. I mean, you're going to kill a 23 and a 22.
Well, there's the last Cavalry coming back to the melee row again. I mean, we are seeing Roltan Shive only gaining a couple points over turn. He's got 2 Scorches going off, which means these 60 are dying. And Roltan should be winning this by something along the lines of 15 to 20 points. It's got to be. Yeah, and there's just no escape here if you're Angstrom. I mean, you have to be looking at that last card as if it's Scorch. There it is, dropping down. The Axeman dying 21 and winning 23 points up as Roltan Shive. And of course, it is going to be the final game that we need to... Well, this is not the final game of the series, but the final deck that Roltan has to win with is Greatswords, and he's going to need to take that against Angstrom's Henselt and Angstrom's Axeman as well. What do you think about those matchups? Because that's really going to determine how this final series goes.
So, Axeman into Greatswords is a bit awkward, because damaging Greatswords helps them.
Yes.
And that's kind of the kicker, is that you're not going to be able to necessarily negate their strategy. Although he does have the movement, so the movement is going to help. But I think Great Swords ultimately has the edge, and I think it's going to be really hard for Angstrom to
Yep,
win. I think
and
this
Rolton's Greatsword deck is teched with something like Muzzle as well, which, if anything, is potentially even more devastating to X-Men. I think Rolton might be in a position to just have it. He might be favored to win this Russian Gwent Open February tournament and effectively dethroning Angstrom, who did win the January tournament.
Yeah, I think the Axemen have, ended up hurting Angstrom, and that's just kind of that's something that, that's kind of something that happens. You hope that you get good matchups, and then you ended up getting unfavorable matchups. But Hensel and Greatswords aren't that surprising choices. On the flip side, if they'd brought Cursed, do you think? How do you feel about the Axemen Cursed matchup?
Axemen Cursed matchup. It depends on the kind of Cursed it is, I think. Cursed, I think, will largely be able to beat Axemen out, probably. But it kind of depends on draws, honestly. It could kind of go either way.
Yeah, I think Axemen are an interesting one. Although the thing with Axemen is that your weather gives you, although it's kind of negated by the points of the boat and the points of the resetting of the Greatswords, the weather is still giving you points onto your Axemen. But the difference, I guess, is that your Axemen reset to a 6 at the end of a round.
Yes.
And I guess that's what it's going to kind of come down to is how Angstrom, if he plays Axemen here, how Angstrom chooses to control the Greatswords.
Yeah, I think Angstrom is going to have to pull some serious plays, a bit of a miracle here to overcome, because he needs to not only win 2 games if he wants to win this series, but he needs to win those games in pretty unfavorable matchups as well. We're going to start off with the Henselt versus the Greatsword, which is the better matchup out of the 2.
Yeah, he's chosen to take the kind of safer play first, and that's often will give a player some confidence. If they have a bit of an easier matchup, then they'll feel a bit more confident going into the next match, and also it gives Angstrom a bit of a feel for Rolton's deck in terms of playing against it, so then he can kind of have more of an idea of what's coming.
Yep, that's true as well. So we're going to see the opening hands. Obviously, Rolton having pretty much exactly what he needs. He's got 1 Greatsword. As long as he can stick to the board, that should be pretty much everything he needs. He's got Muzzle on the K20 Siege support. Oh, looks like we had a bit of an early start there.
A little bit of a hiccup there, but we can see the boards develop now. Angstrom with his 1 K20, now 2 K20s, and Rolton with his Greatsword and his Wellbore of the Sea.
And the Muzzle opportunity is there if Rolton does want to take it, but it's a bit committal after having lost the coin flip, because you don't want to commit too hard when you've lost the coin flip. Here are the 6 strength II coming out for a whopping 18 points off that swing. Man, that is a pretty big deal. And the Ronvid is going to allow Angstrom to stay ahead here as well.
Yep, he's also got some fairly large pockets. I was going to say he did have some fairly large pockets with crewmen, but Coral coming in and shutting down that Ronvid, shutting down the carryover, and the crewman potential into future rounds.
Yep, and we have the Muzzle as an opportunity on the K20 Siege support. It's a little committal, but at the same time, unless you are trying to save it to deny Henselt in round 3, which is pretty tricky to do, seeing as Rolton does not have other forms of denial, no Alzur's Thunder or anything like that. It's not probably going to pay off in any way. So it's just going to be about Rolton developing this round, and Angstrom may be trying to force him out with an aggressive Henselt if he can find it.
Yeah, this is a tough one, because you have to decide if you want to play your Henselt early and try and really put pressure on your opponents, or whether you want to save it for later when your opponent's going to be playing a big res. And this is one of the things with Henselt is a lot of people just automatically save it for the final round, but sometimes you can gain value by not doing that.
I really like this burnout. I mean, this round is a pure point race. Angstrom needs to be able to get ahead. If Angstrom can get ahead of him and take a pass 2 cards down, that's pretty much Angstrom's most major win condition here, outside of course, having Villain Trettenmirth and just being able to outpower round 3. And this Skellige Storm basically forces that out as an option. I mean, even if Angstrom takes the Henselt now, which would be extremely committal, I don't know that it would be enough tempo to force Rolton Chivet out.
I think the Skellige Storm is going to make it really hard for Angstrom to try and get 2 card advantage without playing Henselt, because the Royal Decree is Villain Trettenmirth. You don't want that. Thaler is points for your opponent. You don't want that. The Alzas is... I don't think he's actually running the Netcase. I think that's a 20? You don't really want that's not going to
you
be
probably play the taller out now. This is probably the kind of most sneaky opportunity you can do because, of course, it allows you to threaten the Henselt, being able to force out Roltan Cheve, which forces him to make himself 2 cards down or potentially losing on even to the Henselt. This is the perfect opportunity to play taller, just to capitalize off that coin flip spy combo that we see so much.
Is it going to be enough points? 21 plus all the tick.
This is a triple ram, I believe, right? Or was this ram not created off of Winch? It should be triple ram here. And of course, that's all off of the siege supports, and he will even be able to block just a little bit of the Skellige Storm value with the armor from the siege supports on the machines. I think this is enough.
See, I'm looking at his deck tracker, and all the names are in Russian. Oh yeah, that doesn't work.
Oh, God. Okay, so...
You're correct, it was a winch.
Yeah, here's the Henselt, and this is just going to smash Roltan Cheve's value. It will be close, but I think it has to be enough for Angstrom, and that taller coin flip combo is just going to do so much here in terms of forcing out Roltan on even cards. Perfect opportunity to play taller as well.
And he needs to kind of do some quick maths here and work out the optimal play, because he's got that 5-point pocket, so when he wants to take that versus when he wants to go for a 3-point pocket, and actually...
oh God, this is such overkill. He didn't even need the 3rd betting ram, not by a long shot. So Angstrom is going to be taking this on even cards. He did commit the Henselt early, and as Angstrom, I think you pretty much have to either dry pass and take it to round 3 or go for a 2 round here. You are going to be 1 card up. At the same time, though, after committing the Henselt, if you don't draw your Villain Treadmirth, you actually might... Well, he has got Royal Decree. What the...
He doesn't need to. Yeah, he's got Royal Decree.
I got that.
And he did draw it, so now he can throw Shani. And he's got a couple siege towers in there as well. I think in this situation, on even, you take the pass to get the card advantage.
Yeah, you've got to.
And then, because you've got the Scorch and you've got the Villain Treadmirth, so you can shut down their strategy. Although, instead, opting to go for the Alzas, which goes into... Oh, it goes into a siege tower.
Ooh.
I guess...
So he's playing this out a little bit. What do you think about this?
I mean, you know that your opponent doesn't or isn't likely to have a 12-point play based on their deck strategy unless they commit a res. So you're either trying to force them to commit a res or to commit something else. Because the thing with Rolton is you got to kind of get set up, right? And the question is how much of your resurrects and stuff do you want to set up this turn versus the next turn?
Yeah, so there's the longboat, of course, just generating more value. And as we can see, I mean, Angstrom is out of a pass opportunity already if he wanted to gain that card advantage. Now that Angstrom has kind of committed to playing and not taking the dry pass, and now that Roltan has gotten ahead of him, Angstrom is going to have to play this deeper. He needs to get ahead or try to 2-round here.
Yeah, I think it was a really odd decision, especially not having crewman. I don't mind the initial Alza's play in order to thin a card out of Rolton, because his cards are more synergistic than Angstrom's. But I think after that, I really question this decision to keep playing, because you're just generating more points on the Greatsword.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I mean, you're kind of not really giving yourself extra value that you would not have gotten by dry passing, and effectively, instead of 2-rounding him with 1 additional card, right? Because you force an additional card there in round 2. I mean, 2-rounding in Gwent, unless you're denying something specific in round 3, which in this case wouldn't have been the case, only puts you 1 card down.
But maybe this is a 2-0. Maybe he doesn't feel that he's going to draw anything that useful in the final round compared to what Rolton would draw. Because he's got Shani, he's got Villain Treadmirth, he's got Scorch. So potentially the decision here is that he feels that he's got good enough cards to try and go for that 2-0. And that's why he's choosing to play here. Like, well, that to me seems the logic. It'll
definitely work out because he does have the Villain Treadmirth and the Scorch. He could have achieved effectively the same idea in going through round. Maybe he's just denying Roltan's dailies in this case. I mean, the Muzzle and the Freyas in Roltan's hand are not really going to be able to hold a candle to the Scorch effects coming out from Angstrom.
Yeah, so the thing is, Angstrom would have been a card up if he tried pass. And that's the kind of difference. Whereas I guess he's decided that he'd rather not give his opponent a longer round, right? Because by playing into this round, you're denying a card draw. which
Well,
extends around by one. So
it's not longer though, because if you pass, then Rule 10 has to play one card out. Rule 10 has the same number of cards either way. It's just Angstrom.
yeah, but
could have had
Angstrom doesn't.
Yeah.
So the ground would still be one longer if he had to play all of his cards.
Ooh, whoa. That's
So
interesting.
he forced a res.
Yeah.
And was happy with that.
You do force a res out. I mean, that's definitely not bad. It's something you can do. The Jenga is an option. And we're going to see this muzzle from Roll 10 maybe being bricked as well. Ooh, not mulliganing with the muzzle, but the Mergdebreki draw does give him a potential muzzle target unless Mergdebreki is the last play. Additionally, the Royal Decree Shani will probably provide a muzzle target as well. But these double Scorch effects, unless, of course, the Udalryk is able to somehow catch one of the Scorches, which I don't think is going to be the case.
The Udalryk is painful, and the Mergdebreki is really nice, even if it's a good Hensel target, because he can line up his Scorch.
Exactly. So there's the Shani coming out. This is probably going to provide a muzzle target for Rolton if he does want to go for it. We're going to have to see exactly what he chooses to res here. Obviously, the Henselt is off the table, so you can just try to res something that gives you decent proactive value. Battering Ram in this case wouldn't really do much, but he's not really looking at much better options here, right?
Yeah, realistically, there's not. I think I would go for the Siege Support or the Tower.
The
yeah,
Tower
because
as well is fine.
Battering Ram, you're going to kill a 1 and then damage something that gets stronger.
Yep.
So in terms of his bronzes, I think that's probably the worst choice.
Okay, there's the Longboat coming out. We could see some kind of potential alignment on Angstrom's end, although in this case it doesn't actually look like it's going to be very necessary here, and unless Rolton has some miracle way of destroying this villain Trettenmirth, I don't think he will be able to beat this double Scorch finisher coming out from Angstrom. There's the captain. That's something he's upset about. Is that Longboat the last captain target?
I'm not sure, but I think if it is, you take the Longboat.
Yeah,
he knows what's in
exactly.
his deck, so it's not the ideal situation. You get another boat, and a boat's not a huge play in this situation. You wanted potentially a res. I mean, I don't think he's played Sigurd Drifter, for example, so
yeah,
that was kind of what you're
Sig.
looking for there. Because that's a huge number of points. It extends the round. It gives you a big res with the Jenga, and generally is nice. Whereas Udalryk into a 9-point boat.
So you see.
Great.
You see Angstrom's sitting on both the Scorch and the Mergdebreki. He's doing some math. He's looking for the perfect way to align them. Now, of course, at the start of Roltan's next turn, both of his units are being aligned naturally. He's got a 16 and a 16 because boat's going +2, and Greatsword's coming down 1. Now, Roltan has the disaligned himself by playing this other ship out as well. The Scorch coming down immediately on the Greatsword. That's not coming back. No res found.
This is really interesting because now villain Trettenmirth's really awkward.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not because Mergdebreki can shoot
Mergdebreki
himself, right?
will have to shoot the Udalryk once, I think. And then the muzzle will take the Mergdebreki.
So who wins?
If the Mergdebreki is played on the Seadra, the muzzle will actually put it in the path of the longship, which is really funny, but it never matters. I mean, Angstrom has to win this, right? The Mergdebreki has to come down unless he doesn't see it and he doesn't hit the Udalryk once, in which case it's possible Rolton takes it. Angstrom needs to see this, and he needs to Mergdebreki his own Udalryk, right?
It'd be a huge misplay if you don't notice this.
Yeah, you have to see this line. You have to hit your own Udalryk once here. There it is. A clean play, a safe play. And then, of course, the other longboat goes down to 12, sending it right in line. Oh, and he's taking the even safer play just in case there is something sneaky from Roltan here. So here's the muzzle on the Mergdebreki. This swings back, but the villain Trettenmirth will go off, clearing out this game even harder. And it's going to go to Angstrom. We go to game 5. Again, every single set in this tournament is a 5-game series, and it's going to come down to whether Angstrom's Axeman is going to be able to potentially overtake the other deck. The crack. The crack. The one we just saw. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, it comes down to whether Rolton's crack is better than Angstrom's great swords. Axemen.
Axemen.
Yeah, it's difficult today. This
Professional casters, guys. Okay, so it's, as we were saying though, it's gonna be a pretty tricky because, like we were just mentioning before that last set, Axemen are at a pretty huge disadvantage in this, right? We're gonna have to go to this one now. Do you think Angstrom has a way to pull this one through? Because when you can't really control greatswords and when you're really just kind of giving them extra value on their own, do you think that's enough? The harpooners will really mess with the longship potential.
I think a hand with 3 harpooners, and you saw him mulligan one, but you can always get another with Amy. I think a hand with multiple harpooners gives Angstrom a chance.
Yes.
Especially given that Rolton, needs to high roll a little bit. He doesn't have. He's got one great sword, and he's then relying on pirate captains to kind of find him what he needs.
Yep. So here's the crack with the wild boar. This is just going to be a very solid opening. There's not really anything Angstrom can do to pressure this round out early. Again, as with Axemen, in pretty much any case, you expect the Axemen player to win round 1, but your objective in playing against them is to just force out the round as long as possible. And as greatswords, Rolton will be able to force it very, very long.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. He's got the harpooners and he's got the drought, so he can move things between rows. But with drought, it kind of plays into your strategy a little bit. Like, you need to be kind of very particular about what you move and how you move it. We saw there moving the wild boar of the sea, which I really like, because you've set it up so that he's no longer buffing, or he's no longer triggering that greatsword. And with 3 units on the back row that are smaller, that gives him a lot of room to breathe before he starts actually damaging the unit he doesn't want to damage.
Yep. So here's the Spear Maiden coming out on the greatswords. This is going to pull out the other greatswords, and it's going to put it on just the right side of this wild boar in case that wasn't going to somehow get damaged anyway. And as we can see, I mean, Rolton is holding his own in this drought. He is 30 points up almost already, and Angstrom will be able to whittle away at that, but it's probably going to be very slow, especially with this muzzle potentially forcing out this one Axeman that Angstrom has. If this muzzle comes down immediately on this Axeman, the Spearmen and the Freyas will not be able to find their future Axemans, and that will be completely devastating.
Yeah, I think there's an argument for playing Burner first, simply so that you are no longer muzzleable, because if you play Burner, although you're committing your Skelliger Storm into this round, you're protecting your Axeman from being muzzled, and unfortunately didn't make that choice.
That's it. That has to be just completely devastating. You are Angstrom. Your Axeman deck no longer has the res on Axeman, no longer has the Spear Maiden on Axeman. Rolton's in complete control of this match, and it looks like Rolton will be winning round 1 here after all. I mean, Angstrom's hand is completely bricked after that muzzle. Huge muzzle value.
Yeah, that is huge. And the thing is, Angstrom knew that muzzle was in Rolton's deck. He knew that was a risk, and I'm really surprised that he messed up there and didn't play the Burner first, because although Burner is lower tempo and it's committing more of your weather, you're putting yourself into a position where then when you play the Axeman, because you'd then gain 3 points, it wouldn't be targetable by muzzle, and I'm surprised he didn't play around that, because that's basically game over, I would say.
Yeah, I think, honestly, this pretty much has to be it. I mean, when you are Angstrom in his position, your entire strategy just got completely devastated, and you can poke away at it. You can do this cute thing. The wild boar didn't actually die to the drought in that case, although it could have, but unfortunately, I mean, what do you do if you're Angstrom here? I mean, you can't even win round 1 if you want to.
So I feel like your only real option is to pass, and then hope that you can out-tempo your opponent by drawing into Axeman on a future round.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Angstrom,
and even then, it's going to be really hard.
Oh, and that is just like that muzzle achieving completely game-winning value by itself. Just being able to banish that as an option and punish Angstrom for not having drawn more is just like, it's absolutely over at this point, right? I mean, how do you come back from that?
I don't know. I guess he feels like he has to try and now win this round so that he can have a slightly longer round with Harold, but doing so without any kind of engines is going to be really difficult. And this just reminds me how much I hate muzzle. Like, I fucking hate that card. Like, I would welcome our dwarven overlords back.
Jaggerous,
that meta didn't
Jaggerous, you don't mean that.
No, I probably don't mean that.
No, you don't mean that. Man, so Angstrom is going to have to keep playing this out. I mean, like you said, he's completely committed to this. He has to maybe feel like it's his best option. He will probably have to play the Burna out now if he wants to keep playing. There's really just not much on the table for him here. I mean, he has to hope Roltan Shive has an aneurysm or some kind of misplay or something.
I agree. I'm not entirely certain, what it is he can play here. Burna gives him a little bit more points per turn on the front row. You've got your Heimei. I guess you can pull another warship. Do you have another warship? So that gives you... It's not a big play. It's not like he's got nothing to generate any sort of tempo.
Yeah, there's the pass. Roltan taking it one card down, but that one card won't ever matter here. The Freyas aren't even really enabled in Angstrom's hands, even if he draws more Axemen. And there's the Coral as well. Oh, God.
It's just a massacre.
Oh, the double Axeman draw, though.
Oh, he's got one Axeman. Great.
Yeah, but he potentially has 3 if they keep getting killed. I mean, that's kind of like having 3.
It's okay, he mulliganed one, so now he has a dead Heimei. Oh, you got Darren. Oh, Darren's just gonna get...
Oh, God.
Darren
Oh, no. Horrible. It's a massacre.
It's kind of upsetting. Like, it hurts to watch. I love Axeman, but this is just kind of depressing to watch. And the thing is, Roltan, he might just, like, go for the 2-0. The only card he really needs to hold is Sig, and he's got a huge res, and that'll win him the game. So at this point, he's gonna just let Angstrom play his cards and then do bad things to them. And the thing is, he doesn't even need to commit that Coral now. Like, he can just wait a bit and give Angstrom a little bit of hope, and then just crush it into a small figurine form.
Yeah, here's the Clan Corsair. This is just going to keep buffing it up harder. And of course, Angstrom having no form of hard removal in any way is just going to mean that this goes completely unpunished. And this should be a very clean 2-0. I mean, if Roltan is going for it, he has it.
Yeah, and he's got the decoy on his Resurrect as well, so he can kind of choose what to resurrect, when to resurrect. He's got the Runestone, which might produce something interesting. Maybe we get a lock, for example. You could always see our good friend... what's his name? Everyone used to hate him so much.
Donar.
I feel like it's Locke. Donar. Yeah, good old Donar. So there's a lot of kind of different ways that this could kind of play out, and none of them really look that good for Angstrom.
Yeah, none of them look that good at all. Here's the Burna coming out. It's going to tickle Roltan's fancy a little bit back there. He's not really going to mind too much, but, his units will technically be losing a non-zero amount of strength per turn here, even though his greatsword is just chugging along.
Hey, look, it's our good friend Donar.
Oh, he got it. It's an easy Darren, and that's an easy graveyard denial if it ever were to matter anyway. And he's just waiting for this Axeman to play out, because he knows that once the Axeman comes down, he can just make Angstrom's day. Here it comes. If he wants to deny the last Spear Maiden and the last Axeman tick, stop it, Roltan. He's already dead.
Like, I think you do, though. Because they have Heimeis, so you want to just deny that. It denies Graveyard, and it forces out more Axemen if Angstrom has them.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely take it here. There's absolutely no reason not to. I mean, it just completely shuts out this round.
This is just like, like Mortal Kombat, finish him kind of situation, where, like, Roltan is just deciding how he wants to destroy Angstrom at this point.
Oh, God. Yeah, there it is. Here's the Coral dropping, and if you're Angstrom, the look on your face right now as that just drops, the look of just dismay. And
does he even have any soldiers to res?
No, he has none. He has nothing to res with Freya.
And he has nothing to target with the Heimei.
That's correct. He has nothing to res with Freya. He has nothing to target with Heimei. Well, he could Heimei out something he pulls from this, potentially. But either way, I mean, it's never really going to be enough, unfortunately. I mean, that's just completely brutal. So we see the 15-point lead here on Roltan Shive's end as well.
It's pretty painful. The question is, does Roltan commit one more card? Or does he pass here? Because at the moment he can pass, and then Angstrom has to commit Herald.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so as well. He could decoy, if he wants to be cheeky, he could decoy the boat, but why would you ever do that when you can just decoy the Corsair and res another boat? You have the opportunity to, of course, put a boat, slap it right next to the Greatsword. You might as well force out the Herald and just completely obliterate any chance Angstrom had at having some kind of win in this situation. Ultimately, just when you're Axeman and you get shut down in this form, like, the Darren being locked by the Donar is just the icing on the cake as well.
Yeah, it's just everything that Angstrom played, Rolton had an answer for. So it's kind of one of those situations where it just feels bad. Like it's kind of just painful to watch. And there's the pass, and Angstrom's just like, I'm done with this. Like, get me out of this game. This is like just like uninstall Alt F4, delete System 32, and just never use a computer ever again.
Oh yeah, that was such a devastating defeat. So that concludes today's Russian Gwent February Open. The final match going to Rolton Shive, dethroning Angstrom and taking the winner of the Russian Gwent Open February 2K18. And this means that he will be seated in the top 16 for the next month of March as well, which we will probably be casting here for the English broadcast.
Yeah, hopefully I'll try and figure out what's up with my mic and Skype before then, because I know some people were talking about that, and we'll look to kind of make whatever improvements that we can. Bear in mind that we are rebroadcasting the RuGwent tournament, so it's kind of dependent on them. But shout outs to RuGwent for giving us an awesome tournament. It doesn't require too much work on our part in terms of setting it up. We just kind of show up and talk, which is always lovely. And so yeah, thanks to them.
Yeah, I mean they have fantastic production value for how they do things live, and if you are know anyone who speaks Russian, that they definitely have a nice little channel there.
Yeah, it's a great tournament, and it's cool to see the Russian scene kind of improve, and hopefully these are names that we'll start to see in the Gwent Slam and the Gwent Challenger and Gwent Open going forward, so other tournaments, and maybe even our own Topdeck Open going forward. Ooh. As we do have some more of them on the docket coming up in the next few months. Keep an eye out soon, TM.
Yeah, there's not any more, unfortunately, we can say at this point. Anyway, that's going to be it for this broadcast here. We will see you guys later today, actually, on this channel, literally 2 hours from now for the Grandmaster Plan podcast. That's going to be it for us.
Yep, thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time.